Welcome to the Cincinnati School Board Finance Meeting. We hold these meetings once a month. And today, I would like everybody to introduce themselves as we go around, and then we'll get right to the agenda. My name is Eve Bolton, and I'm a board member. Mr. Crossett?
Yep, Jim Crossett, board member. Michael Guston, treasurer.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency.
Emma Mueller, Internal Audit Supervisor.
Phyllis Davis, Board's Administrative Assistant.
Robert Wilson, technician, and if at the end of the meeting you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public, please click the hand icon. We'll ask your name and association to the district, and we'll invite you to speak at the end.
I am Serena Faulkner, the Grants Compliance Manager.
I'm Julio Garcia. I'm the Senior Grant Accountant.
Good afternoon. Cody Hutchins, Contract Analyst.
Shauna Murphy, Superintendent.
Kareem Moffitt, Board Member.
All right, thank you. And when board member Mapp comes in, we'll make sure she gets introduced, and anybody else that's coming in as well. So we'll start with the agenda, and we begin with our monthly financial reports. And I don't know, I kind of heard them trading chips back and forth as to who's presenting, but right now on the agenda, it's Mr. Ashley.
Sounds good. So I'm going to start just going to slide 4, Rob.
Okay.
So this is the cash and investments summary. So general ledger for all funds added together 167.9 million. You can see on here we had at the end of July we had a lot in Star Ohio or in U.S. Bank, and that was as a result. Right at the end of the month, we got a large tax advance from the county, and that's reflected there. And then what we had in Star Ohio, our long-term investments and our debt-related items. The next slide is the fund breakdown. So general fund at the end of July was 76.9, debt service 60.4, and you can see the others detailed out there. The next slide is our annual investment report, which is actually the third item on the agenda, but I'm going to go ahead and cover it here.
Okay.
So this summary, it just kind of gives a historical what our investment revenue has been for the last 5 fiscal years for the general fund and the debt service fund. We get a little bit of interest for trust funds, and that's not reflected on here, but just to kind of show what that track has been. It was a little bit less last year, and that's in part because we've drawn down our cash balance. So as you can imagine, not earning quite as much interest on those. The other packet, which Rob doesn't need to pull this up, has a little more, it includes a summary of our bank reconciliation is in that packet. And then the other piece that is required is through our investment policy and through Red Tree, they invest in commercial paper and bankers acceptances. And in the state of Ohio, if you do that as a government, the treasurer has to have special training related to that, has to be in your policy, et cetera. And one of the other requirements is that you report to the Ohio Department of Education and also through the Auditor of State, a listing of the transactions related to those investments. So that's what this packet is. It'll also be in the treasurer's report on Monday because the board has to acknowledge that as well. And then we get it filed.
Could I ask a quick question? Talk a little bit more about the investments so that the public understands the
Sure.
investing money that we have, money that is theirs, whose money are we investing and who's investing it for us?
So this is for the account that Red Tree manages for us. So it's not something that the treasurer has to approve every transaction, but within the parameters of our policy, they search for things that will provide, so they have to diversify our account. Certainly they're not putting everything in long-term investments. They're not putting everything in short-term investments. They're trying to maximize that for us. We also have hit them up recently with, we might need to liquidate some things to meet our cash balance needs. So they manage all that for us through an agreement. And like I said, they've signed off on our policy, so everything they're doing should be in line with our investment policy.
If I can just add,
Sure.
just add quickly there. So yeah, we really, the idea is to make money off of our money. So as I think this committee certainly knows, we get big chunks of money once or twice a year for our tax advance and our tax settlements. And so we have two kind of strategies. One of them is, and I think we talked about this a lot, the Star Ohio account, which is kind of a high interest savings account. So we move a lot of money between Star Ohio and our traditional bank account. High liquidity is just like having a high interest savings account you would have at home. And then the other side of that are these investments that Mr. Ashley was talking about. They're more longer term things, so it's not a checking account, but we are also by law, kind of required to invest in fairly safe investments. So that's one of the things that I've gotten asked multiple times as treasurer is, can we take all our money and put it in, whatever the hot stock is, Amazon, whatever the hot stock of the day is. And no, that is not, and you cannot speculate with the money. So you're basically limited to treasuries, those sort of investments and commercial paper. And so we work with Red Tree Investments. We worked with them for several years. As our investment company, they do a good job of getting us good returns, keeping an eye on things, making sure, we're doing the best we can. So
Do investments play any role in any of our bond rating, or is it kind of very separate from all of that figuring?
separate for the most part, but it is part of, as I think we've mentioned, the biggest thing our bond ratings folks look for are cash balances, and so any money you can bring in through investments, helps keep your cash balances going. And some of the money that we're required to hold, especially in the debt service fund, is stuff that generally gets invested more because we're not going to take it out very often. A lot of our debt service payments are done once or twice a year. And so you have a little bit longer of a time horizon to invest and get money. Investments, though, we do recognize those as potential revenue. You'll see in the forecast. So that's another question people ask is, if we get additional money in from our investments, is that free money? Usually not. Usually we've already, recognized that, incorporated that in our forecast. It's one of the line items that we do forecast out.
Do you do that based upon what the trend has been, or that you check the market itself on an annual basis?
Both.
Okay. I'm just going to make one reference. You kind of pulled a Mary Ronan for a minute there when you call it our money, which is a famous quote from her regarding preschool promise. But of course, it is not our money. It's our revenue.
It is our revenue,
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. Okay.
It is certainly the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
It's certainly the district's
Yeah,
money. But
we all
yes.
participated in it. For
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so the next section kind of goes over the general fund in more detail. So actually, Mike's going to do the cash flow, and then Cody's going to take over from there.
All right, next slide, Robert. July one more, thank you, sir. July, as tends to be, is a good month for us. We start seeing property taxes come in. Property tax bills were delayed a little bit this year. So another tentacle of the property tax reform legislation from January is that a lot of counties had to figure out how to calculate all these things. And we'll actually talk about that a little more in the forecast thing. So, but there was a bit of a delay in property tax bills, so we're a little behind on getting all of our advances, but got lots of money from that. State aid looks about normal. We got returned our advances. So if you remember, at the end of June, the board approved advancing money into funds that were negative, which is generally your state and federal grants because they work in a reimbursement model. So now we basically pay ourselves back, or the district pays itself back, however you want to say that. That was pretty standard. For expenses, July was a 3 payroll month. So that was a lot. We paid a lot there. Plus there was a lot of other things in there, some employee terminations, there were some payouts of, annual leave and stuff like that also factored in there. But other big point is we finished fiscal year 26 with $43 million in cash. So not great, not horrible, but that was our ending cash balance.
How close was it to what you anticipated?
We were pretty, we were not close. How far are we from from the February forecast? Kevin?
I think we were off by about that, looking at this number.
Because our encumbrances were down. So we anticipated
about that
about
last
17
time.
for encumbrances, so we were about 5. So we were about 5 positive on encumbrances and what, about 15 negative on overall cash. So about 10 million, Kevin, is that?
Yeah, so we had anticipated not being even for 26 because of some strategic, spending down some of the preschool balance. But we ended up as a 16 negative as far as excess, so expenditures exceeding revenue. Again, we had planned for a couple million of that. So I'd say about 14 million. And like you said, the encumbrances were quite a bit less than we had projected.
To the credit or negative?
Encumbrances would be, in this case, would be a credit. Having less encumbrances carry over is better. I think Mr. Cross was kind of referring to unencumbered cash. So that's like the ultimate number at the end is how much, unencumbered cash you have. And so if you have less purchase orders open closing the year, you have more unencumbered cash for next year. So I will turn it over to Cody to take it from here.
Good man.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Rob. So the next few slides will just kind of be a visual representation of what Mike just talked about, so I won't spend too much time on them. Looking at our cash balance being significantly lower than last year, that is the combination of what Mike mentioned with the delay in the property tax reform, but also expenditures going up, so that makes the perfect storm here for a lower cash balance than last year. And then next slide, and then to note on the encumbrances, looking at encumbrances from last year, those were significantly higher than this year, but looking into that, it was the timing of when contracts are being entered. So we'll probably see a spike in that going forward. And then this is just a 3-year plus this year in history of the cash balance. Just another way to represent where our cash balance is and how it's represented against prior years. Next slide, Mr. Rob.
Could you go back to the other slide and just interpret it for me a little bit?
This one here?
Yeah, what's that telling us? I can see the lines.
Yeah. So this
The
is
analysis.
showing that we are what was stated in significantly lower in a cash balance in previous year's starting point. It looks like from last year about a $10 million difference from starting cash to this year. So we're about 10 million less than we started last year. But you can see those big spikes there. That can be interpreted as when we probably received more of that property tax reform without that delay, we'd be a little bit more on track towards that. So.
Just curious, when the county money comes in late, like it has this year due to the complications of calculating it, they're holding on to our revenue. Do we get any? I mean, we're losing interest on that. Do we get any interest accumulated? I'm just,
We don't actually, I mean, technically they're doing us a favor because we're getting tax advances. So technically by law, and I've heard some counties in the northern part of the state aren't doing advances anymore. So the auditors are just saying, we'll pay you a settlement. You get all your money at once. They don't get advances anymore. Our auditor, who has been great to work with.
She's absolutely gifted.
She is, and her team, Auditor Miranda and her team are gifted, and was actually very supportive of this district, and we should always. But they actually established a nice schedule of every 2 weeks for advances. That was something that started back in January. Before that, it was kind of like, oh, we get an advance, we don't, but obviously, depending on when the bills are due, that's when you're going to see the money. And if the bills get pushed back by a week or 2 weeks, you're just not going to see that money. The other fun thing, I guess we'll talk about it now. One of the other parts of the property tax reform in House Bill 186 is this homeowner credit that the state wrote into the law. And that is about $12 million that our taxpayers got as a credit on their tax bills this year. And the state's actually the one making that up. So that money we won't get from the auditor's office, we'll actually get it from the state. And that actually came through, this week? So I was actually surprised it came through this week. So you'll see as we get into the August, you'll see the kind of the spike trend here. You'll see a lot more money in August that we probably would have gotten last year in July.
So it's more money than we would normally get?
No, of course not. No, this is the state, of course not.
So actually
So
just,
it's a credit to taxpayers. What, explain that for me.
Yeah, and the property tax reform, there was a credit added for taxpayers as like instant relief. And it was only for counties that had reappraisals in 23 and 24, right? Because we were one of the ones that were included because of where our
was definitely
reappraisal was.
23. 'cause that
23,
was the
yeah,
only
23 was
one.
ours, but our appraisal was there. So every property owner got a small credit. You know, a small credit, that was good. And then the state, if you notice, last weekend was the tax-free weekend. And you notice how it was only 3 days and not 2 weeks? And how they decreased the amount that for individual
how they
items?
paid for it.
That's exactly how the state paid for it, is they reduced, they in order to keep the district somewhat whole, after doing this, is they reduced the tax-free weekend this year. Took those sales tax amounts, and now they're sending them back out to the districts as credits for the property tax money we would not receive.
Just want to understand the property cycle advancements, like the revenue a little bit further. So is that money or revenue that we get on a monthly basis with like a 2-week cadence, or can you just break that down a
Yep.
little bit more? As I know that we see sometimes like in the months of January, February, we're seeing kind of an increase there, but if you could just help us understand this cycle a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah. So traditional property taxes, if you think about it, bills are due generally in January and July. You know, it's at some point. And what happens is, the auditor's office calculates the amounts, the county treasurer sends out the bills, county treasurer collects all the money. And then what generally happens is called a settlement. So the auditor takes all the money that's settled, and basically goes back to each jurisdiction and says, Cincinnati Public Schools, here's your amount. City of Cincinnati, here's your amount. Green Township, here's your amount. That's the tax settlement. That's usually done a couple months after the bills are due. So if your bill is due in July, August or September is when the settlement's due. And it can be quite a financial stretch for school districts and other folks when this is your main source of revenue. And so what most county auditors have done is they've said, we'll allow you to take advances because they're getting money in every day. And so so they pick a day or two and they say, we're going to do advances. We have to send a letter in that has to be signed. I have to sign it that says, please give us the advance you've gotten. Traditionally, that was kind of not random, but it was kind of like, oh, we're doing advance this week. Who wants money? And over the last year, Auditor Miranda's team has really like formalized that to specific dates, and they send those out ahead of time. And it's really nice. Like I get an email and it says you will get a tax advance on July 14th, July 28th, and August whatever. And it makes our jobs a lot easier because we know when the money's coming. And that is a very recent change and a welcome change.
Perfect, thank you. And then one other question, I could be completely off base. But does that in any way correlate to the tax anticipated note, or does that work in any type of way, in like conjunction, or is it completely separate?
It's completely separate. Tax anticipation note is you're actually borrowing money from a bank or financial institution based on the taxes you'll receive. So we're able to, especially short term, know that we're going to get $150 million between, say, July 1 and September. And so if we needed to borrow, you could go to a bank and say, we're going to do short-term borrowing. And the gist is we'll give you the money now, you repay us once you get your settlement, and then obviously the interest on top of that.
Thank you.
So a couple things I'd like to add, if you don't mind. Sure. Just quickly, So the $12 million rebate that is coming from the state is as a result of that inflation cap. So they said our 23 values were higher than inflation. And so that's why they gave the taxpayers the credit this year based on that. The credit this year that happened that we're seeing now was for all of calendar year 26. So it was essentially like a 6 million each half. They didn't have time to do it the first half, so they doubled it on the second half bills. It's a temporary, the state providing that money is a temporary fix. So when values and rates are reset for next year, taxpayers will see a savings and the loss will come to the district. There will not be a state makeup of that. So just to kind of point that out, I mean, the gist was to do this temporary relief and look back to like tax year 23. But with the 20 mil floor going away, which will cause revenues to go down, it will all reset. The taxpayers will still see the benefit. They won't see a credit anymore, but their costs will be less because of the reset.
And that's from the state. We have nothing to do with it.
Correct.
Sure.
I know that there's going to be a recalculation of property taxes.
It was for tax year 26, yes.
So that will happen for property tax owners where their property tax values will be.
So tax year 26 collected calendar year 27. So yes, there may be slight increases. Again, the inflation cap will come into play. So if values, let's say the county auditor put values at, 15% increase and a 3-year inflation was only 9, then that inflation cap will make sure that the homeowner doesn't pay 15. I mean, I'm using round numbers here.
I'm trying to understand the impacts to the district over a period of time, not just in this one. So you talked about that a little bit, so that's what I'm
Yeah.
pushing you to a little bit further. So the impact to the property tax owner will be that they will see a $12 million benefit from the state, which was intended to be seen in a smaller window so that the property tax owner can realize the benefit in the time period is realized. But what would be the ultimate impact to the district relation to 2024? But I'd like for you to expand that a little bit more so that we get a broader window of time rather than just a moment.
So a couple layers to that. The emergency levies, which will become fixed sum levies in the future, generate a certain dollar amount. So that dollar amount is spread out over all the taxpayers. If one property owner's value goes up more than the average, they'll pay a slightly more share of that. So you have to look, I'm trying to divide it into 2 buckets. One is the emergency levies or the fixed amount, the fixed sum levies. For those, taxpayers with the adjustments won't see a lot of change. If the property value goes up on average, you're going to see an average change in that. Where the bigger piece is like inside millage, where the rate is set, this inflation cap will hold for that part of the tax bill, will hold it down for the taxpayer. As far as the district, again, for the emergency, there'll be no real change in revenue. So the biggest change for the district is kind of holding down any growth that would have been there because of the 20 mil floor or, as the values go up.
Yeah, I think,
I think some of the people get confused when we talk about some of the legislative changes that are coming in the 20 mil floor, emergency levies being converted. And so I think there's just a little bit of value in talking about, when you talk about House Bill 187 and the changes, expanding on how that benefits or doesn't benefit the district from a long-term standpoint. as well.
I think one of the things for us, for sure, about that, when we first started, kind of learning about the property tax changes, the inflation deflator, that they put in, we were looking at that saying, okay, well, that's gonna decrease the amount of increase you get from the 20 mil floor. But then right behind it is the law that moves all the emergency levies into the 20 mil floor. So now that's not even a thing for us. So we first looked at, we're like, oh, we're gonna get hit there because we're not gonna get much as an increase in 20 mil floor. But now that you're completely off the floor, we are really, your fixed sum levies, as Mr. Ashley said, are going to generate the same amount across the board. The only difference for the homeowner is how your property is in relation to everyone else's. So if your property goes way up and everyone else's stays the same, you'll get more of a hit there because you're dividing a big number across every property. But the current expense levies, the traditional levies, will just continue, the millage will just continue to drop, every year because of House Bill 920, so that they end up collecting the same amount over time until we get to the 20 mil floor, which could be decades at this point, I think. And then the third part of that, the little part of that, is the inside millage. So inside millage increases kind of irrespective of everything until they added the deflator to it. So an inside millage is probably about between 30 and 40 million. We get 35 and 40 million every year. Yeah. So we may get a little increase on that, but now it's going to be inflation adjusted. The interesting thing is, I think, is all these scenarios were put in place at a time when property values increased really high and inflation was relatively low. Now we're in an environment where inflation is relatively high. So as long as inflation stays high, I don't know that this law is going to have its intended impact. The assumption was inflation would be, between 1% and 2%.
They had problem changing administrations.
But if you're doing 4% and 5% inflation over a couple of years, this whole thing might not have a whole lot of effect for folks who are at the 20 mil floor.
Any other questions? Could you just say the difference between a fixed sum versus an emergency, and that the emergencies are eliminated?
Yes. Another part of the property tax reform is emergency levies, as where they're used today, are eliminated. To do a true emergency levy going forward, it can only be for a maximum of 5 years, and your district either needs to be in fiscal emergency or have a declared federal emergency in your district. So what we would use as emergency levies, we now have an option called a fixed sum levy, which does the same thing. It's not for the emergency needs of the district, it's for the continuing operation of the district.
And does it expand or not expand? It's fixed sum, it doesn't change?
Doesn't change, fixed sum, 5-year max. And it has to be an existing emergency levy that you kind of convert into. You can't create one kind of from scratch.
Other questions? No.
And I think, so this graph is just a visual representation of our revenues over the last 3 years. So we just talked about revenues being down due to the property tax reform delay. All other revenues remain relatively steady, and we'll start to see, like we talked about, those start to level back out in August. So, next slide talks about expenditures. And this just highlights the points we talked about earlier, with salaries being a little higher this month due to it being a 3-pay month, whereas last year, I believe the 3-pay month was in August. So these next 2 months, we'll start to see those level out. All other expenditures are a little bit lower, but that was due to timing of contracts. So once those start coming through, we'll start seeing a level out in those as well. And then I'll wrap my section out with preschool. So as we've not had our wonderful little kiddos for the last 2 months, there are no graphs to show on those. So I'll just talk a little bit about our budget and the balance sheet here. These are initial estimates based on what we know. And so I believe next month we'll start seeing those payments to United Way. I think if I looked at it correctly, the next payment should be next month. So we'll start to see that show up on the reports. And then we'll start seeing those other categories of expenses go up as well. So we can start spending down those dollars. And relatively, we're up last year compared to where we were at this time in spending, mainly due to salaries and personnel. Any questions before I pass it to Ms. Serena?
I did see two different commercials, and maybe there are more for, interestingly enough, United Way, our trusted entity. One of the two commercials is about basically early childhood. The kids that they're featuring, it's getting ready to graduate. Mom says we need an early start, so it's interesting that United Way is certainly proud and holding on to the preschool promise, although they don't say preschool promise, as one of the values that they have in offering services. I thought it was pretty good. I forget what the other one is. The good commercials. I've not seen United Way make commercials though very often, but that was interesting to me.
Thank you, and I'll hand it over to Ms. Serena.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is our state and federal grant cumulative average spend. And as you can see, every month since February, we have been ahead of our goal of 85% spend. We still have 2 months left in the year, and encumbrances are still paying out. So we're hoping to see that continue to trend upwards for the rest of FY26. Payroll for last year is now complete, and we do still have encumbrances, like I said, paying out. So we're very close to the final numbers that we'll have for our spend. Next slide. So this is just showing some of the same information from the previous slide, but this does also include our non-public spending. And then we have our links to the FY26 school budgets on this page as well. The things that we will be working on this month is that we're going to continue to work with our budget managers on submitting and approving our FY27 applications, getting those plans in place and updates that we have from the state for spending. And then we are also working on preparing for final expenditure report. We're working with budget managers very closely to get all of the encumbrances paid out on time so that it does not carry over into general fund. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is showing the percent spent or encumbered for all of our grants. Our open encumbrances are down to 1 million. This was a big drop for us from last month. And we are continuing, like I said, to encourage our budget managers to close so that the charges do not impact general funds. We want them, to close up all of their grant encumbrances. All grants are above our target for FY26. And this is also important for our Title I non-competitive state support grant, as they do not allow for carryover. And we actually just met with our consultants, and kudos to Cincinnati Public Schools. We do have the highest spend level out of all the urbans in the state.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A clap for that.
Absolutely. A couple of things, if people were just watching, and we all understand everything you just said is great. But, from a fiscally conservative piece, it's like, well, we are so glad we spent every dollar.
Yes.
If you don't know about grants, you would say, well, they weren't watching what they were spending, or maybe you can explain the reason we want to spend every dollar that we have that are grant dollars and why.
So the reason that we do need to spend all of our grant dollars is because every year whatever we don't spend is basically, tallied up for the state, and then they redistribute it. So that could essentially means that we're losing
Our
funds
children don't get
as
the
a
money.
district. Yes.
And then what's non-public money or non-public stuff? What does that mean?
Our
Where's
non,
that money going?
to the non-public schools that we are the financial stewards for, for CPS.
And what are the services that are rendered to the non-public schools?
The same services that we provide for our students, supplies, some staffing, am I forgetting anything else?
Purchase services.
Yeah, contracts,
Okay,
yes,
all right, so non-public schools are getting money as well.
yes.
Does that include like intervention specialists or, yeah, in terms of staffing, what type of staffing are we providing? To the non-
Yeah, so it's basically, the schools make the request based on their allocation. So it's pretty much staffing, it's teachers, supplies, and we have a lot of, locations. So some of them have enough to make like a FTE, to have like an actual person. Some of them don't really have the funds to, fully fund that position. So it varies by schools.
That's interesting, I didn't know in terms of teachers, I mean, in terms of maybe like, math intervention specialists or reading intervention specialists, but out of these funds, they're also able to, support them having teachers in the charter and private sector.
For the title students only, it's not for the whole general population.
Just for clarity, I don't think this is charter, but it
No.
is private parochial.
Yes,
Sometimes it's school psychologists. It could be whatever they designate they need the dollars for.
Those people are employees,
They are Cincinnati Public School employees.
so there's Cincinnati public employees that are teaching non-public kids in parochial.
That's correct.
That's true.
So this money on top of other dollars that we have to use to support private parochial and charter schools.
And you said they have to fall under the classification, obviously, of the type of stuff. Okay.
Cool?
I guess my next question, how do you separate that out? Like, well, how do they separate that out? So if we was to provide a teacher, does the whole school have to be considered like, under Title I or, okay, just elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, so we are given a list by the state, so oh, sorry. Yep, so we are given a list by the state based on what schools are eligible for Title I funds, and that's how the funds are distributed. So they're the ones that make the decisions on how they want to spend their money. Yeah.
Would that be considered more of like the site schools?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and they, we have a non-public person, so they're assigned to her, and she handles she has a big old spreadsheet of all of our non-public schools and what the funds are used for, so we have a good way of tracking how the funds are spent.
I think that's something that needs to be pretty broadly shared, because it is not broadly understood. Same thing about like transportation and whatever, but all that needs to be understood, that everybody's got, kind of a, how shall I say it, that everybody's got a part to play in this,
yes,
to be successful, so.
yes. Last slide, please. Okay, so this slide, just as a disclaimer, is not containing any new information for this month. We don't have anything to add. This is just a reminder of where we're standing for FY '27. And so next month, we will be having updates to this slide and the award amounts, and everything. And that is all that I have. Is there any other questions?
Any other stuff that we need to cover? Grants, superintendent, you good? All right.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Oh,
never
sorry.
mind.
So I do have a question, it's just been something that's been brought to my attention around, our school social workers. And we know that we do have some school social workers that are paid out of title funds, such as Title IV. And, so our ELL social worker, our PBIS social worker, and so, and also with our bully prevention. And so I am trying to make sure that we are able to maintain those services while also having the representation needed in our buildings as well. And so wanting to get an understanding of how we're working through those different funding sources to ensure that we're not supplanting our dollars.
Yes, ma'am. We've been doing a lot of work to ensure that that does not happen with our Student Services Department, with our Treasurer's Department, also working with the Federation to ensure that we are very compliant and there won't be any issue or concern. The Bully School Social Worker is out of general fund, so should not be an issue for us at all. And we have looked at how to staff schools so that there are as many full-time positions in as many of our buildings as we possibly can have. I think in the spring, we shared with the board, our goal was to have no more than 4 shared positions, and that was Kilgore, Hyde Park, and then Cairns and Fairview. So that was my goal all along, and we're working with the treasurer's office to ensure we don't have any of the supplant issues.
Are we able to get further information as you continue to work through this about
ma'am.
what that would look like? And then also, my question is, what would what is the documentation process of making sure that like title dollars stay title dollars and general fund dollars remain as such?
Yeah, absolutely, which is why we're working in collaboration to ensure that happens. I think the team is maybe meeting right now. I think they started at noon to give those final assignments out and to make sure that we don't mess up any rules.
Yeah, it can be fairly complicated. I mean, we have, what is colloquially called social workers really is several different positions. All of our grant applications have very specific information built into them. From time to time, I know Serena, I'm glad she's here, but from time to time, people who are doing multiple duties may be required to keep additional documentation. There's some time and effort work. If part of your job is funded out of a federal grant and part's not, you need to keep track of the work you did to make sure you're putting the right number of hours into that piece. So a lot of moving pieces right now. There's also, just to make it more complicated, there's also an attendant social worker position that we created with our Title I funds. That is a school selection. So it is a position that the schools can select with their ILTs and their LSDMCs if that meets the school's one plan. And then those positions are kind of held separate from all the other positions that we're talking about because it's a school choice, comes out of the school title allocation, and we have to be clear that for the school title allocations, the schools are the ones kind of driving that spend.
Okay. And so what you were speaking to, just referencing back, if there is a position that is paid partly from title fund dollars and partly from maybe the general fund, is that the split funding kind of mechanism?
Yes, and then we do keep track of that monthly. There's documents that we keep track of and submit when needed. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So as I said to the so I thought I could budget, so I asked the budget question, and I didn't get a response. So I thought, well, let me ask the question.
Thank you. I thought, well, let me ask the question because I don't really get responses to my emails. So I did ask the question around title commingling of funds because it's pretty important to me. But I'd like, before I really ask my specific question, title money, give me the definition of title so that I'm understanding. Title money, supplanting, I would like for you to talk about so that the public is clear, so that I'm understanding what the usage of title is. We talk a lot about general fund, and I think I don't want to get it mixed up because we don't talk enough about the proper usage of title. And we were talking about general fund, but that's not title. So when we talk about social worker positions at board meetings, some of them are title funded, some of those positions, and some of them are not. So we're talking about general fund and people are getting a little confused. So talk about the usage of title. Leave that screen on that slide on the screen, please, Rob, and then talk about how title is to be used, and then I'll ask my specific questions that I didn't get an answer to. Can you talk about that?
So start for the public. Title is a broad thing. There's really 4 titles, right? There's Title 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we work with. Title 1 very specifically has 2 parts, if you think about it. And we're just talking about stuff for CPS, not the non-publics. But there's kind of two branches of Title 1. There is the school allocations, which we kind of discussed, but part of Title 1 is money should go to the schools directly. The schools should use that to kind of improve their programs and provide support for economically disadvantaged students. So we have that. That's the Title I school allocations. I think we've talked about that. Every school gets a budget or gets an amount. They put a budget together. Some of them have the attendance social workers, a lot of reading specialists, math specialists, all those positions. There's also a Title I set aside the district has. We use that for different things. Notably, some of that money goes into our early childhood program. So it's the match for Head Start money. Also, our Project Connect is mostly funded out of the district set aside. Plus, there are a lot of, I think, what I think are now our network folks, our Title I positions that are part of the district set aside. That's Title I. And then there's Title II, 3, and 4. They all have slightly different rules. Title II, 3, and 4 are built to be more district-wide. And in kind of how it's worked, they're meant to help do district-wide programs. You'll notice like Title II is for improving teacher quality. That is a lot of our district-wide teacher PD. That's a lot of stipends for writing curriculum and those sort of things. Title III is for English language learners. And again, you see a lot of district-wide things. There's some curriculum supports in there. We have a district-wide ELL manager. He's partially paid out of there. We have some translation services, a lot of those things. Title IV is kind of a mixed bag of title stuff. So it is academic enrichment. It's also health and wellness or health and safety. There's a little money in there for technology. And so traditionally we've used Title IV for the district's PBIS program. And that was a big thing of it. We also have our social emotional learning curriculum is in there. Lately, and this is honestly something that's over the last couple of years, is we traditionally had huge carryovers in Title IV. And we had a need to spend those carryovers down, as this committee knows. We don't want to give money back to the state. So over time, some of our curriculum stuff has ended up in Title IV. Especially non-core curriculum, so like world languages and stuff. So that's kind of how we filled up Title IV. So all the titles have first duty is anything you do should be supplemental, right? So all title funds should be supplemental in nature. So it should not be things that are required by law. They should not be things the district provides to every student. A couple of tests we do for that at a pretty high level. If things were general funded in prior years, there's a higher barrier to get it to move into title funds. Again, if it is a state required thing, it's very hard to say, okay, that's supplemental. Those sort of things. There's also the concept of supplanting, which means you can't look at schools and say, okay, we're going to have the same position in these 5 schools. But the 3 title schools, we're going to use title funds for it, and the 2 other schools, we're going to use general fund. And so a lot of times, we look, especially in the elementary level, we look at Kilgore, and Hyde Park as our non-title schools versus kind of the rest of them. And then obviously the high school level, we look at Walnut, as our non-title high school. So I think that's kind of a high level.
It is.
I'll stop there.
It is definitely that. Okay, so when we talk about moving positions around, I'm sorry, I just lost my sheet. So when we talk about moving positions around and I'm gonna say co-mingling, like using one position and paying for it with title money and general fund money and keeping them separate. We just got the Boost grant, which is a wonderful opportunity for our district. That's not title. It's not general fund. Is that restricted funds?
Boost grant, Boost grant will end up in a Fund 19 for us.
Okay, that was one of my questions.
So it is restricted by the grant, but kind of like every grant, there are very few people who give you money without strings attached at this point. So there are obviously requirements that we have to meet. Looking at the MOU, the requirements are pretty broad, and I think in general, the work is very similar to what we're already doing with general fund work. So it is restrictive, but it is not, say, as restrictive as some grants, maybe not as restrictive as title funds.
So we're allowed to just use that money and then just pay for various positions that we see fit for.
The grant was specific that there is funding for 5 positions, and then there is funding for some other services and things through the Information Technology Department. So those parts are specific
Okay, gotcha.
to the grant.
And that would not be considered like supplanting or anything like that under the conditions of the.
No, there's no supplant kind of rule on that kind of thing. So it's very similar to if if some rich person, if they're listening, if they want to come in and give us $1 million to hire whatever, we would just roll with it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I asked those questions and I wanted to know, so thank you very much.
And again, it is possible that one position is being paid by 2 different sources of revenue.
Yes.
It's actually one of the more confusing things about personnel in a big school like
Yes.
a big district like ours. So if you're getting, $50,000 for whatever as your total summary salary, then, you could have 25,000 of it's because you do this during the day and 25. So multiple sources of revenue could even pay for individual
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
personnel.
I'll give you a couple of examples. Some of the folks in early childhood education, like Director Brooks, I think she's paid out of 4 different funds because she's paid a little Head Start, a little Title I.
That's a,
Yes.
she's
Very
one of
good
the people
example.
that I will allow that,
Yes.
she finds money.
Yes.
Because she has to use like last.
She does, last dollar yet, yes.
It's amazing. It's
She's
amazing
paid out of
what she's able
everything.
to do.
Our reading and math specialists at the schools, because part of their job description is doing PD for the other folks in the building. So they're 90% Title I, because 90% of their job is serving students, but 10% is Title II, because 10% of their job is going and providing additional kind of in-building PD. So that's a good example. Third example, local grant, the local Holocaust and Humanities Center funded half an FTE at Pleasant Hill. So half of the person's job, I won't mention her by name, but half of her job was, I think, in the library, but she had, 4 bells or so of that work. And then they funded 50%, and that was to do some stuff specifically with the grant to develop a program for them. So these are very, very common. They're very complicated. They're a lot of work for our team, for HR. HR's team spends a lot of time trying to get the splits right, but it's fairly common.
And I'm very familiar. I worked under a Gear grant and under Bob C's, so
Okay.
I'm very familiar
Yep.
with it. But I asked specific questions around our social workers and around the Boost grant, which we just received from the state. And so I wanted to get an understanding of those, particularly, timely, and I didn't. So thank you for the
Do you
information.
have the answer now?
In part, yeah, I do. But
What else do we need
the
to-
email is still open and still there. So yeah, we're good.
Well, I don't want to leave unless we have our answers. What else do you want to know?
I think we're good for that one.
I think that, as I mentioned just a minute ago, that team is still working and
Working.
ironing out some things. So
Yes.
I think I responded, Dr. Moffett.
Not for that
We
one.
received it, and Mike and I will get the response.
Not on that one you didn't, but
No,
on
no.
the other one about this one you did, but on the other one you didn't. Other side. But we're good.
But
We're good for
they're
now.
working through it.
Yeah.
I do have another question. So, just trying to process and understand, in the event, and it can go in either direction, if an employee starts out where their full salary is paid from title dollars, and for whatever reason, they're no longer paid out of, something about their scope of work transitions out, right? and they're no longer paid out of title dollars, but they're moving to being paid out of the general fund, like, what is, yeah, so not so it's just, maybe it's a transition in their scope of work, I guess, right? How does that process work to reflect that, okay, they're no longer maybe operating from this particular scope of work that was paid under the title dollars, but now they are transitioning into a different, I guess, again, line of work where they would have to be paid out of the general funds? Like, what does that documentation look like? Or, I don't know how soon we document if, an employee is paid out of title funds. I don't know what the expectation is or what the requirements are, that would reflect, okay, this employee is paid out of title dollars, but now their scope of work is changing, maybe in an upcoming year, and now they'll be paid out of like the general funds. Like, how do we track that, or how do we process that?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yes,
Okay.
and it's never like the perfect situation you would hope. Ideally, ideally you would say, okay, we're going to take title dollars, we're going to create some new positions, we're going to open them up for anyone who's interested in them. We're going to move things. A lot of times, though, it's a matter of through this kind of planning process, so employees are working, and employees are working full time. They never really see their funding source. I think a lot of employees have no idea what source they're funded out. They're still getting this. They're getting their same check. They're getting their same benefits. But I think through the course of the year, as we go through the budget process, as we see what our title dollars look like, as maybe other grants come in we're not anticipating, as we're redoing one plans, as we're doing all this planning process, I think as we're doing a strategic plan, like you start to see emerging needs come in, all throughout the spring and even the summer, to say, we really need a person to do this. Superintendent's standing up this network model that's creating new positions. And so we're trying to be nimble to say, okay, here's a new need that's been identified, working with HR, working with the administration, what does that position need? How can we fund it? Okay, cool, that's a new thing. Sometimes we find a lot of opportunities. Oh, that's a new thing that's doing this. That really should be EOEC. That is the definition of that grant. Let's put it in that grant, right? Let's save our general fund money. Let's put it in that grant for year one. And sometimes that happens, boom, okay, are there employees interested in it? Someone's already kind of doing that work. We transition them into that new position, kind of show them what their new role is. A lot of times there's a title change, and then they're just kind of working through it. That makes sense.
But it's possible for us to be nimble and flexible to kind of be transient in how individuals, employees are paid. Yes. From the different funding.
And I think, Ms. Mapp, I think we have had recent examples of that. So I think Michael and Nan and the grants team, as I said, they've been really great stewards of spending our money. And I think we've been awarded because of that. We've gotten more dollars recently. I think they didn't exactly say it this way because they know we will spend it appropriately. And so I think that's a testament to the team as well.
Yeah, a great example. Amy Randolph identified a position that was part of the strategic work we're doing this year to expand one of the career tech opportunities. Original budget we had in the general fund. As the grants team learned more about it, we said, wait a sec, we can do it. This is perfect for this other grant we have. And so we were able to take that position. Employee never knew, it was the same employee, but take that position and then move it to the expanding opportunities grant for this year. And then we have those savings in the general fund. So it is a nimble thing, and it's really a lot of moving parts all at once. And it's really a good partnership to keep these things going.
Thank you. And then lastly, you said that Title IV, did you say we need to, I see that we're at 92% with our spending there? Is that accurate? Am I reading that accurately? For the allocations? Or is that
Oh.
what we received in terms of the?
It's what we received this
Okay,
year, yeah.
Okay. And so are you saying that there's still a need to spend those dollars down a little bit more? Trying to go back to what
So-
you said.
Title IV, we were just stating that we've done a better job than we have in the past on spending those dollars. So we typically have a lot of carryover in Title IV, and that it might not be the case going forward. We've done a really, really good job of spending that down. So there's, perks and
So sometimes we're victims of our own success. You spend the carryover, then you don't
Yeah.
have it next year, you know?
And that is actually part of the issue, if I
You know,
recall the last two budgets, where there's been great improvement about lowering the carryover. We used to kind of, I won't say depend on it, but it was always a place we could kind of piggyback that we could go into, and then when you spend it, it's not available to you.
Yeah, you eat that last piece of cake tonight, you're
That's
not gonna
right.
have it tomorrow, you know?
Exactly right, so, but that's what we want, because we want these dollars spent on the kids that it's meant to be, and during the budget
Yes.
year that we have it.
yes.
Not at some other time,
You're here.
for sure. Okay, any other, social worker questions or grant questions, or? All right, let's keep moving.
I think it's time for what we've all been waiting for,
You know it.
the
I'm back.
forecast.
Oh,
Oh, no, not yet.
you wanna do your PAFR?
The PAFR?
We could, if you want to do it. I mean,
We
Cody would probably like that, because he always gets pushed off the
That's
agenda.
right, so I think we've,
All
actually, I
right.
think there's been at least 2 of the last 4 months that's happened.
All right,
to.
let's talk about the PAFR, because we would like to,
We gotta publish.
yes, we would like to move towards publishing that, and we obviously know our marketing communications team is very busy right now, so.
Go for it.
all righty. Well, next slide, Mr. Rob, and we'll start talking. So what I did here was the next few slides, just to lay some foundation here, is drafted up based on FY25 year-end data. Once we get feedback and the construction of this thing figured out, I'll start doing the FY26 data. But just going through, first slide here, and this is based on all the feedback that we've gathered up to this point on examples that Finance Committee has greatly shared with me, or anything that we found. Trying to tie it all together, also making this package about, I think I said 4 pages front and back. So it's not too lengthy, it's attention grabbing, it's easily digestible. There's a lot of information in here. And we'll just kind of go through the flow and just get some feedback, and then we'll go from there. So first slide here is just the introduction, starting off with Treasurer Guston and Superintendent Murphy. Just took those right off the district website. If those need to be tailored in any certain way, we can, or whatever we need to use. But just wanted to lay the foundation work there and introduce those two. And then flipping to the back side of that first page is where we'll introduce the board and anything the board would like me to add there as well, any vision update, goals, anything from that. I know the strategic plan, we were working on that. So I know we talked about in one of our meetings using the word values from that, and adding any value to that. So welcome any kind of input, good, bad, ugly. I'd love to throw it all. I love all the feedback. So, and then introducing the internal audit, because I know there was a ask to introduce internal audit and kind of talk from a glance what internal audit does and how we differ from most districts in having that, and what services they provide for us. So I'll keep going. And then here, after the introduction of the district, we start with the district profile. So there was a couple feedbacks on having enrollment diversity, which I took straight from the FY25, school year 25 report card, and using the student diversity and what we have, but also adding in our community diversity. So this graph is straight from Rockmill. You might have seen it before on a presentation that Mike has done here. So that is just copy and pasted over here. I did not format it to make it match the format, but obviously I will going forward to make it pretty. But just wanted to give that raw data. So we had both the overlook of the enrollment diversity, but also the community diversity that we have here at Cincinnati Public. And transitioning into just laying some financial transparency work for us. Obviously, this is saying February 2026 with the budget and 3-year forecast, but kind of laying the intro work for Mr. Kevin to kind of take over after here. And we'll start getting that Or I guess September forecast, right? Is that what? August, yeah. So I guess that gets approved Monday. Yeah, okay. So trying to get my year straight here, or month straight. I know, right? I'm telling you. I can't even believe we're starting school back. Like, phew. So we'll update that with the August forecast and show those graphs as those get updated. And then, as we heard, our grants team is doing some fantastic work. So we wanted to highlight some of the things they did and some of the excellence that is our grants and how we're making sure we're utilizing those dollars so that our students are getting what they need, but also alleviating some of that general fund pressure. And then next slide, Rob, is probably most of what the feedback I heard around was presenting what our challenges to financial stability that we face as a district. And so here we got a couple graphs that I got from our Hamilton County auditor and talking about effective millage rates, assessed property tax valuations, and then ODEW and their base costs per pupil and percentage funded. So what it shows is how the gap is widening between state and local support. And the graph kind of says it for itself. I don't really need to put words there. State's just not holding up their end of the bargain and pushing a lot of the pressure onto our taxpayers, and that's becoming evident. We're seeing effective millage rates flatten out, which is causing that fiscal squeeze based on inflation and everything that's going on. We're not able to collect as much. And then property taxes slightly rising over the past few years with the major increase due to that property tax reform in 2023 that we all talked about already earlier. So laying those three out in the same slide to kind of talk about a story of what the district faces and why we are where we are. That a lot of what we are facing is not our fault, and that a lot of what we are facing has been put onto us by undue circumstances that we are having to deal with and now iron out. And then kind of to take the roller coaster back up the hill, even though we're facing a lot of those challenges and how we compare to other districts of our size or kind of like our peers, kind of show a per pupil spending here and how CPS does keep on track and sometimes a little bit lower than some of our peer districts, but also we have, as reported by the state report card, higher graduation rates and higher district performance index scores than most of our peers. So just kind of laying that story out. As CPS faces a lot of financial instability and a lot of questions, we are still performing. Our folks are doing their jobs and our kids are getting the education they're supposed to. And then second to last slide, kind of wrapping things up, there was an ask to include a section about the facilities master plan and paying that off and what all that's done for us. So I did take that straight from our 2025 CAFR or ACFR and took that straight out of there. So that's where that paragraph came from. And then audit results and financial awards was another ask to talk about how the district is being very fiscally responsible with our money, what we're doing with it, our bond ratings, and kind of highlighting what that conversation was with our investments earlier. Might be something to add in there, as I heard you guys talk about that a little bit earlier in this presentation. So that might be something to add here. And then this next slide, the final slide and the final page would just be kind of a wrap up. Like I said, this is of FY25, but this was something Mike put together for one of his CPS by the numbers for one of his Money Matters with Mike segments. So reusing that, I did love the graph that marketing or the visual representation here marketing put together for us. So just re-highlighting that and kind of just tying it all together with a pretty bow. And I'll open the floor for any feedback if we want to provide it here or if we want to submit in writing, however.
Have some comments? Jim?
Sure. On the beginning, at the very beginning where you have internal audit, I kind of feel like I wouldn't mind if that square highlighted the beginning part of that highlighted the fact that we have external audits that are clean, and start with that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a little odd to start off with internal audit in that place.
Okay.
But I think if you're going to talk about audit right there, start with the external audits being clean for the last 15 years or whatever it is, and then talk a little bit about the fact that, and I think it's okay to highlight the fact that we have, a very robust internal audit, one of the best in the state, somewhere in there. I think on the page 5, where you have a chart showing the percentage per pupil, local versus state. Some narrative language around that that I like these days is to talk about how the partnership between the state and local schools has broken. I think that's a better word than to say the state's not doing their job. You can just say the partnership it's broken, or the partnership is, I don't know, I like that, using that word.
Absolutely.
If that's helpful. And then on the second to last page, where there's a lot of words, nobody's going to read this. I think if you could use some bullet points
Okay.
instead of paragraphs, would be make the readability a little bit better. And just really highlight some key points rather than, I think, if those are some
I
thoughts.
actually love that
Good.
feedback.
Sure.
'Cause-
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Matt? Yeah, I think that's great feedback. I'd second the issue of not starting with the internal audit. I think it's positioning more than what you've got included. I would lead with the things that make you sound credible.
Okay.
So that's whether it's a bond rating or the clean audits or what have you. I think you need to highlight the community audit committee as much as you highlight the internal auditor. I mean, that's getting way in there. It's much more impressive that there's a community audit committee than the fact that we love our internal audit person, but I think the committee is more important than that. The district profile, I do like that it's a enrollment as well as what the district looks like, because we lose sight of that. I think that's important. I do think maybe a little bit more thematic, like on one page is about transparency. One page is about accountability. One page is about something else or whatever. And I'd lead with the fun stuff, like, Mike's numbers about all that we do. I think that's kind of fun. And you're right, I think the bullet points. The facilities master plan, I think that's somewhere, if you're gonna make a historical reference of where we are, that we're paying it off more than describing it, or what have you, because you could shorten that a little bit. In that provides, and I think you do need to, the per student piece, I think you're also gonna have people that want to see things by school. And I don't know what kind of chart that's gonna be, but that's what they'll look at. If somebody reads this, they're gonna look for their kid's school
Okay.
before they're gonna try to figure out the district stuff. So, but I think I'm so excited about us having this, and we need to get it done and finished and prepared. And it can't really talk about a levy or anything like that, but it certainly is giving us good stuff. And lots of links should be there. There should be some place they go for more specific information and that actually do, links that actually go somewhere. Superintendent, do you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am. My comment was going to be, I do agree that we need to start doing more things by school. When you see the final strategic plan, there is strong effort to ensure that all of our students have exactly what they need and that all of our buildings are strong for the community. So that makes sense to me to think about with my team moving forward in terms of what we share with you.
I like this by schools piece, and I think being able, and I know this is a financial report, I don't know how much room you have to put that, but I think being able to showcase like images of the great work that we are doing in the district. And I think another area to incorporate as we look at the CPS by the numbers, I think it would be helpful to reflect what our programming looks like by the numbers, as well as, how much our students are receiving in scholarships. When I think about other districts that reflect that, they kind of highlight that as well. And I think that's really good information to also highlight the great work that we're doing in the district.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I know I'm not on this committee, but I will just give you some.
Slows you down.
Well, you know, it doesn't. It doesn't. It never seems to matter. But I will give you some of my thoughts. I wanted to ask a question first. Who is the intended audience?
The intended audience will be the public.
Which part of the public? Because it says financial report, so I can understand why you have a lot of financial data.
Yeah.
But if you're talking to financial people, then my comments are different. If you're talking to a parent, then my comments are like, it's very graphy and graphic-y. And I don't know if they really want to see all that. If they're going to understand it, it's going to zone me out if you got a whole bunch of graphs on there. So like if you go to, slide 26 on here, Rob, just like that is heavy for someone who is not math or tech savvy. And I'm not even gonna really take the time to look at that, even though that's very useful information. I had to, just me, as a researcher and a scientist, had to look for CPS. And CPS is at the bottom, it's in the bottom, second from the last. And that's, I had to find it. I had to find where CPS was amongst all those other districts. And it just was kind of like, pick the top, maybe big ones that are looking like me. I'm not interested in Akron. I'm not interested in Dayton. In my mind, I'm just thinking maybe we want to highlight, or to, I think Eve or Kendra's point, have some links, but maybe use it as a picture. Maybe have a picture of Cincinnati and a picture of Columbus and say we beat them, or make it a little bit more interesting and interactive if that's your intended audience. Someone who is on a high school level, or like, I think we need to think of it in that manner. The other part that I didn't see, but I would love to, is we have taken a significant amount of time to have a corridor model, to have programming that's significant, and I don't see anything about that in this. So when you talk about school level, it would be really nice if we started talking about the words that the board passed around corridors, around magnets and programming. People want to see what they are immersed in. So if I live on the west side, I'm looking for west corridors. I'm looking for what schools are on the west, or I'm looking for Montessori's, or I'm looking for neighborhood schools. So we need to start bringing them into the words that we're using within our district. If they don't ever hear corridor, but in a long report, they don't know what corridor means. But if it's in these types of reports, then they're gonna start understanding what the words are that we're using, and they'll start using corridor. The 3E was developed 15, 20 years ago, and people are still talking about that right now.
And then 4E, which I agree with, which is
So-
entrepreneurship.
Right, and so while we're trying to maybe go away from that has value, that people are still talking about that.
It's back in.
Oh, well, good, but my point is still the same, in that we need to start using the vernacular that we want people to start using, and it needs to be consistent across strategic plans, across marketing materials, across all of that. So corridor is a word that we've used, and we need to start ensuring that people hear that. I am really for links. I'm for links that go places that we can track usage. So if we find that we put up a link to as an example, to the strategic plan, and we get 1,000 hits off that link, then maybe we need to start paying attention to the fact that people are going there. And that's, so everything should be marketable. Everything should be a data hit and an analytical point that we are using. Less words, to Jim's point. I'm not reading that paragraph. When I saw that, I was like, this is really pretty, but I'm not reading that. I'm just not. I'm sorry.
No, that's
And
right.
so
That's the
you
feedback
did a
we need.
hell of a job.
Yeah.
You did a hell of a job.
Thank you.
But it's just too much. And so I call it toilet time. People want things that they can see really, really quickly. 10, 15 minutes is their time. It's toilet time. That's just my word. They want things that they can kind of get to quick. And so if they go other places, then we know now that that's where their interest is. But we need to use that time for that, like to pick that stuff up. And I don't want your work to be in vain, but
No, it's okay.
I think it would behoove us to pick things out that they really want. So corridors, links, and then just words. And it's about kids. And I only saw one picture that I had to figure out what that was when you said thanks to marketing. And I had to look at that poor baby on slide 28 to figure out it's a kid behind there. So maybe we need to have some pictures to kind of put people's kids in. We're all about kids.
I will.
So I know it's a I know it's a financial thing, but maybe some of our background stuff, like when you had the picture of Mike and Shauna on there, that kind of drew people in. So maybe have some pictures of kids on some of the pictures to draw people in so that it's not so boring.
Absolutely.
So just to give you some permission to be fun
Okay.
with finances, even though it's not a fun topic.
It's not comfortable for me to be fun, but I'm gonna do
I
my
got you.
best.
You got permission to smile. You got permission to
there's-
smile.
There's a whole department that can
Yes,
help
yes.
with
Yeah.
all of the.
Yeah.
I was getting ready to say, my good friend Nick over there at Community Marketing he does all my, my quarterly financials, and I was waiting for him to do the picture. I was gonna give him the free roam to make that sucker pretty, so.
I do think it's an interesting angle to talk a little bit more about programming.
Okay.
I think we do need to use language and get people used to that, but one of the ways to start that might be the comparison of what you all showed us, what the state actually pays for, or what the state says it should be versus all the layers that have, in 200 years of what CPS actually is. People kind of think, oh, this must be how everybody is. No, there's not another district in the world like this. And it's because besides that, that we moved so far beyond the standards. So I think that might not be a bad idea to try to, if you had to work programming in,
Okay.
that might.
My last little comment is if
Yeah,
we
sure.
could even kind of start highlighting some things that we're already doing. So Money with Mike, the link to the YouTube, Just Ask Jen. We've got so much stuff that we've done that people don't know about, and it's so fragmented. It's really exhausting to get people to say, "Oh no, we've got a whole thing on title. We've got a whole thing." If we take every opportunity that we have to educate people on what already exists, whether that be a link or a slide that you say, "Hey, you want more financial information? Go here." We do that stuff, but it doesn't go anywhere. So if we could recirculate some of that stuff in links or just regurgitating it, that would be great too. So that's just my only.
We good? Jim?
Just to follow on, I think Dr. Moffett made some good points. On that one chart with lots of graphs, you might want to just focus on the big three school districts. And you also might want to truncate the vertical axis, because it doesn't do as good a job as differentiating how well we are outperforming them. It's a little too subtle when you look at it from a distance. But if you can truncate that, if you have trouble doing that, I can help you do that. But it would show us outperforming them a little bit more visually.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Anything else? Okay.
No, just want to say thank you for that feedback. Appreciate it.
Good. Keep going. We already did number 3, right? Yes, we did. Thank you.
Turn my mic on. I think we're up to the forecast.
Major reason we're here. There you go.
All right, so just to set the stage a little, I'll let Kevin do most of the work here. So we're going to present today, get your feedback. We will add the forecast and notes to the treasurer's report, which we'll do a revised treasurer's report on Monday. Incorporate the feedback we get here to that and the presentation. Unfortunately, there's only a 0 business day gap between this meeting and the business meeting, but
No,
such
we
is.
had to move this meeting so that we'd even have this before the board meeting.
Yes,
Is
and
that correct?
We did, and then we're meeting a week early, so. We'll go through everything, so as a reminder, state changed the deadlines for the forecast. This has to be board approved by the end of August. So that gives us Monday, that gives us all the board meetings, we have exactly one. This is also, I'll continue to say my little piece about how the timing of the forecast makes no sense now, so.
Right.
So, we're gonna present a forecast for this fiscal year and next fiscal years, and yet we don't have our tax settlement at all. We have not had one student report to school. We have we don't know what our enrollment's gonna look like in any of the things, so it is very much based on where we finished last year. July, I thought the November forecast was always better, but I don't have a vote in that, so.
That's right. State did another thing in the name of reform.
Yes, so with that, I'll let Mr. Ashley get us going here, and I'll just interrupt him as I see fit.
Sounds good. We'll go through the slides pretty quick. I'm sure
Okay.
we'll have a lot of discussion, so if there's any questions, we can elaborate on those. But this is just kind of repeating some of the basics, like Mike mentioned, the timelines. I think they've gone to calling it the forecast instead of the budget and 3-year forecast. They just gave it a generic term. Some districts are still doing the traditional 5-year.
Good for them.
We can,
A little passive aggressive, I like that.
we can actually generate either a 4-year or a 5-year. So for this purpose, we left it at 5, but that might be something that could be changed. Sure. Yeah. No, you're fine. Is that the right one?
Because we can also be petty when needed.
The other, just a reminder, this only talks about general fund, doesn't reflect federal and state grants, which we talked a lot about today. It does reflect general fund dollars that have to cover debt payments. So you're going to see transfers out related to that. We also transfer money to the 034 fund, which is classroom maintenance, which was required as part of the facility master plan. It's a little over $3 million per year. So that's in the transfers out. But aside from that, this strictly focuses on general funds. As Mike mentioned, it'll be in the treasurer's report on Monday. The next slide, I'm not going to go, this is just a reminder of the property tax reform measures that we talked about. So we've kind of talked about those. Again, like Mike mentioned with the tax settlements, that's kind of what slide 4 talks about. Slide 5, we just kind of wanted to highlight this. Our consultants that we work with really suggested that we don't take ownership for some of these changes because they were given to us.
Right, this is not our business,
It's, people like, and I've heard people anecdotally say, how could the district have spent all this money? It's not a spending problem.
Right.
It is more or less the changes in revenue that we're forced to deal with. So what this slide kind of talks about is what we knew and what changed and what we know now. So it just kind of gives you a visual from November of 24 when a forecast was adopted. It was based on all the assumptions at that point, the 20 mil floor, et cetera. And then when we got to June of 25, that was when the biennial state budget was approved. Again, the base cost inputs weren't updated. So that was a big factor that affected our projections. And then December 25, the property tax reform measures. And then with 26, we're basically reflecting the new environment that we live in, which obviously necessitated the levy ask that is going to go in November. So
That's good.
so we thought this kind of lays that out a little bit of how things have developed to where we are today.
So as we get into the forecast, I think that's where we're going next. This one was a tough one for Kevin and I. We tried to straddle two worlds, and I think I think I've mentioned this, but I'll say this again. The district is kind of at a fork in the road, and there's a future with the successful levy and new revenue that allows certain things to happen, and there's a future without new revenue that looks dramatically different.
And that is if this one in November passes.
If the levy passes, there's a future that has a much different spending trajectory, a much different revenue trajectory. There is a future that has the levy fails that again is much different. And so trying to file one forecast, which is hard because I think one of the things we will do from this point forward, especially this committee, is really build two separate financial pictures. A levy passes and a levy fails financial picture as we talk through budget and everything else, because they're going to be so dramatically different. But for the purpose of filing one forecast, we tried to stay in the middle. You'll see as we get this presentation, there are slides of no levy, with levy, The official big forecast there, which we'll talk about, the big sheet of paper. You know, there are lines at the bottom that reflect what the levy would look like for us. But for the interim expenses and revenues, we tried to kind of stay in a middle spot, and we can talk about that a little bit more as we get to the end here.
I thought that in a forecast, you're not supposed to anticipate
You're not. That
new
is
money.
that is why it all ends up in this little section at the bottom.
But
That
I'm
is your
just
new
saying,
money.
this is, not anticipating it is what is going to be shared with the public and what the board is gonna pass on Monday. So does this reflect the levy failing?
Both, actually.
Right,
Right.
no
There,
levy.
yeah, there is, and so like line.
You're gonna have a levy. This is you cannot anticipate it passing. You can anticipate that we've got a levy because we voted on it. It's happening.
Yes.
But you can't anticipate it passing. That's not supposed to enter into your planning here, is it?
Yes and no. So it's yes. So there's
Internally, it enters into your planning as you're developing a budget, but the forecast itself, I thought,
so
you're not allowed to anticipate that revenue as part of your forecast.
yeah. So traditionally, the forecast that we present, and you'll see this, goes through line 12.010. 12.010 is where generally it stops, and that does not anticipate any new levy. Because we have a levy on the ballot, that is where lines 13, 14, and 15 come in. And because it's been filed with the Board of Elections, you know, we include it. Because it's a real thing at this point, so you include it. The places where people are gonna look at this and say it's kind of crazy. That works. That's a cleaner version of this giant document. Yeah, I think. Right, Kevin?
So that's no new levy.
That's no new levy. So we are anticipating. So weirdly, we are anticipating deficits in the out years, which we can talk about. But it does weird things for the WIF levy section. So the WIF levy section looks like we are putting a lot of money in the bank.
Where does this forecast have to go? We have to file it with whom?
ODEW.
OEDW,
Okay.
yes.
And when we file a forecast with them, what are their rules?
So they're still going to use the parameters, the yellow cells here. They're going to look at current year and the next 2 years to see
Okay.
what your cash balance is projected to be. If in the current year +2, you have a negative, which we did have that instance happen once before, where they then want you to provide a remediation plan
Right.
as to how you're going to do that. They're only going to look before the levy, assuming no levy. That's what they're going to really look at. The levy modeling is more of a planning tool, I think.
For our budget.
Correct.
It's not necessarily for the forecast.
But I believe even if we include the levy modeling, I think we're required to do that, as Mike mentioned, since it's approved. It pushes it all to the bottom, so it doesn't really change anything in substance within the forecast. It just adds that layer of if a levy were to pass based on all of these assumptions,
But
where
the
would it be?
forecast assumes that it's not passing.
To a point, as Mike mentioned, to a point. It assumes both. If you look at line 1201, 010,
12.010, yeah.
that assumes no levy.
And that is the
No
line
new
the
levy.
state, that is the line the state uses to test, to say, are you in fiscal caution, watch, emergency?
Right.
And it's been a long time since we've been in this situation where we've had a 10 years since we've had a new money levy. Renewals go in a slightly different spot, you know?
Right.
Which we've done those before, but this is a whole new section of the forecast that we haven't used in 10 years.
So when the public sees this document, or they recall what the dialogue and the discussion was at the last board meeting, especially from Member Armbruster, question to you. Does this forecast say what you said at the board meeting?
So that is kind of the crux of the discussion today.
Yes, that's what I'm saying,
let's-
because we can't have multiple things.
Right. So one of the question Board Mr. Armbruster asked is without new money, how quickly can this district end up itself in fiscal emergency?
That's right, that almost verbatim.
And I said, and this is very true, it depends on the will of the board to make reductions, right? And we know, and the will of the community to live with those reductions, right? I mean, where the state comes in is where a district cannot balance its budget, right? And then they will make the choices for the community. The community cannot make the choices, the state will come in and make those choices, regardless of how people feel about them. What we know is, at a minimum, you're looking at $20+ million of reductions coming in next year's budget. The realistic number is probably double that. And that assumes a tiny,
60.
I'll say
I'm
40,
saying
but
over
yeah,
60.
it could be 60. I mean, we are for the most part without a whole lot of safety net.
It's
We have used our safety net, and every time we have a situation like this week, where we have unanticipated weather events, that's just more things that we don't have a safety net for, and more things that we have to find a way to pay for because we don't have a choice, right? We don't have a choice to fix the things that broke when the power was out. We don't have a choice to not clear the limbs and brush and all the other things that got damaged, right? We have to do those things so our kids have a school to go to next Wednesday. And that all comes into money that we have to find somewhere. And so with a $43 million carryover, which we talked about, and $40 million of cuts, it would be very easy to put ourselves in fiscal emergency almost immediately. Now, the corresponding side to that is that this board has passed a resolution and has honored that resolution saying that expenditures will not exceed revenues. And that has been for several
Well, it doesn't
years.
say all revenues, though.
Forecasted revenues, I believe, is a word, yeah.
Yeah, it's it's very limited. I think that's one that Jen pulled on me, but I still resent, but it's all right.
She got you good
She
there.
did get me.
She got you good there. And the question, unfortunately, is rhetorical, but it is very much about, can the administration recommend enough cuts that the board can agree to get to a balanced budget? And we know every year that gets tougher. We all sat through, 7 months of budget discussion this year?
So it may not be the answer that you initially gave, which was if the board can make it tough enough to cuts, as much as if we would only be able to stay out of fiscal emergency if this amount of dollars were cut. If the levy doesn't pass.
If the levy doesn't pass, there's at least 20 million and probably 40 million and maybe 60 million in cuts that have to be made.
Okay, yeah, because we didn't think in terms of what we owe in transportation and all that kind of stuff.
I mean,
So let's be real about what this dollar is.
We're still trying to put a number to transportation.
Exactly.
We're still trying to put, the things that are expensive are not getting cheaper. Transportation's not getting cheaper. Special ed is not getting cheaper. All of the things that we buy, curriculum, software, those things are not getting cheaper.
No, but I'm just saying that maybe a better way to approach it, your answer was perfect on that evening. But my point is, it's not a matter whether the board has the nerve to cut. It would be that we would have in order to avoid fiscal emergency, if not next year, in 2 years, we would have to eliminate these many dollars. And then and those dollars have to be big enough that you're talking in terms of what does that actually mean? That means that number of schools, or that means no this program, or no transportation, or no this or no that. I'm just trying to, I don't want it to be based upon, because if you do it like, if the board has the nerve to make these cuts, well, the community said, well, go make those cuts, but that's not really what it is. They need to know what those cuts might be.
Yeah,
Not whether or not we have enough nerve to cut our travel time. It's not even about that. It's like, how many teachers, how many schools? So I mean, it has to be as tough as your answer was, or even tougher
yeah.
on Monday night.
I mean, one thing that I think people are clamoring for two pieces of information. One of which is, what will the board do differently if there's new revenue? What new things the district going to do? And I think a lot of that's tied up in the strategic plan. A lot of that's tied
There
up.
is no strategic plan if there's no levy,
A lot of that's.
if that's all new stuff.
And
And frankly, the strategic plan isn't all new stuff. There's stuff in the strategic plan that we're doing probably that could count as, deepen in, do it deeper, do it better, or something like that. Who knows?
we are definitely spending money on strategic initiatives for sure.
Yes.
But I don't know how you launch anything new, because that's more cuts you have to make. So that's something else you have to stop doing. So that's one question. But the other question that I think people really want to know is what's on the chopping block next year? What is the next 20 million to be reduced? What is the next 40 million to be reduced? And I don't know if that is a conversation that this committee starts to have. I don't know if that's a full board conversation as we get into budget, but I think it's top of mind.
Have that board discussion depending upon how you frame this forecast on Monday night. I mean, it's something we do have to talk about.
Yeah, but it's top of mind for people is what are those next cuts? And I think that's kind of the playbook that people are used to.
Yeah, well, I would add to that, what I hear about the levy dialogue anyway out in the world is you have to tell us, okay, you want this levy, how are you going to spend it? I don't get that, what are you gonna cut if it fails? That's the second question. The first question is, okay, we passed the levy, what are you gonna spend it on? They want a spend list before they even want a cut list. I mean, that's what, that's what I do, all of my intellectual work at Kroger's, by the vegetable stand for some reason.
To your point, what are you gonna spend it on? I think people also, while the reality may be that we need operating expenses, I think there needs to be some type of message to, there has to be something tangible and strategic and innovative, where the levy dollars will be, supporting some type of new initiative, because people are, from what I'm hearing, people want to see results. And so, yes, while there may be an expectation for us to continue to maintain and have operating expenses covered, but the reality is people are saying, well, join the club. I'm doing that in my own household as well. So there has to be a conversation about what this levy is going to help, like, truly support specifically. And then also the other aspect of that is, how are we going to continue to sustain, right? I think that is the other aspect of the discussion as well. And I think those are real questions that we have to be able to answer.
Agree. So to get to the nuts of the forecast, so if you look at revenue, so we'll kind of get back on track. If you look at revenue, which is the 1.0 sections at the top there, so you can see as anticipated, it stays. It's really the ones and twos, I should say, the ones and twos, but you can see, it stayed relatively flat for 27, 28, 29, 30. 31 is a little weird because there's a renewal in there. So, so you have to add, the 617 plus the renewal at the bottom there to get a number, but you can see, kind of again, very, very flat revenues. Kevin, do you want to say anything?
So, Rob, if you go to slide 6, that's a visualization of that first line, just the property tax number. But you can see that there was, slight increases, 25 and 27 is basically those half-year effects of the tax. But you can see going forward, it is basically flat. And that's because of all these measures that are meant to do that. I mean, that's the intended outcome. The 26 million is the portion of the renewal levy that will be in November 29 ask, depending, on how that goes. There'll be one more year of collection there, but then that would drop off. So 31, you'd have a half-year collection. So that's the one renewal that's on the horizon that will be dealt with when we get to, around November of 29, not 1900. We're going backwards, but anyway, so as Mike mentioned, this is kind of just a visualization of that first line. I don't think I included a graph for the personal property.
I think I want to echo all board member, committee members' comments. The more concrete information we can have about what the money will be used for will be helpful. Hopefully, the completion of the strategic plan might help leverage what some of those things could be. I think in terms of what cuts we might have to make if the levy doesn't pass, it seems to me that the administration, already went through a pretty significant process to make the cuts for this year. And I don't know necessarily if the administration has to go back and reinvent the wheel. There's probably a priority of cuts that you already had internally within the administration about, making those decisions and recommendations to our board. It might be, that might be a starting point to have that conversation rather than just sort of, as opposed to maybe shooting in the dark about where to make the cuts. You guys have already looked at maybe the mitigating impacts to students, and you probably already have a list, the next list somewhat established. So just a suggestion, that might be helpful for us, if that's something that we have to talk about on Monday.
I think so. I mean, we were asking to
Is
pass
that,
this
I don't know, is that a good
forecast.
idea, or?
Yeah, well, we, in my years here, we have never done the threat thing. But I think this year we are doing the threat thing. Meaning, if this does not pass, we're going to have to do this. And I don't know how specific we want to be about that, but it would seem to me that it's anything outside of the classroom, basically. I mean, what is all the extra stuff that when it's not even extra, it's to the core of the whole child? I mean, do we provide, the kinds of support systems, whether it's social workers or whether it's the nutrition, although it's pays for itself, or do we, do whatever we need to do to maintain school-based health centers that aren't necessarily self-sufficient? What do we do about the extracurricular? Whatever's outside the actual classroom and the instruction, you're talking about student academic results, anything that is not part of that would be on the chopping block. Now, that doesn't mean we're gonna get kids to come to school without buses, but that people would say, well, it's the classroom instruction. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know what that really costs.
Yeah, I mean, those were definitely the conversations that, administration struggled with,
Sure.
to the point, before we even made any recommendations to the board, and then the board struggled with, I think, the same conversations about, if you can't get kids to the school, what good is having the classroom if kids, so just to kind of stay on forecast a little bit
Okay.
as we go through.
Well, let me tell you, we
But it's
are on the
good.
damn forecast.
But it's good.
Because this has to be discussed on Monday.
Yeah,
This is serious stuff. There's 85 days or so before this thing has to be passed in front of people. And if we can't make this forecast clear, I don't mean to be mad, but I sense this forecast, usually it's a, Hail Mary, pass the forecast. It's not a Hail Mary forecast anymore. This is it. If somebody's talking to me about, the state coming in and taking local control from us, that's serious stuff. We've lived through at least a brief moment where that was thought of, and years before even more so. But it's just, this is not the usual forecast conversation on Monday night.
Agree.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Well, not, I'm the lone board member, and not that you asked my opinion, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. So I do agree with you, Eve, that this is definitely not, this should not be a rushed conversation, but I'm just gonna give you my opinion. I think it should be about what cuts to make, but I also think that I'm telling the administration, you need to also have a conversation about generating revenue, because I don't hear enough conversation of possibilities about what cuts do we make in addition to possibilities of revenue generation. And so I'm not telling you what to do, because it's not my role. I can give you some suggestions, but the public, this board member doesn't want to have to necessarily sit through more of that, it's gonna be gloom, doom. I wanna hear some possibilities. We have a list of things that you all thought about and things that you all have excluded. Some things on that list you may need to revisit, but there are other possibilities. We as a board are gonna need to entertain the community, because, we're gonna have to do some of that. We need to listen to what they want to see. So we're gonna need to do some things ourselves, because we've based those cuts and those decisions off of our values and what we know to be true. I think some community values have changed. I don't think Community Learning Center, that value has changed. I think people want that. But I think things like the distance of transportation, we all want them to get to school, but I think maybe the community might say, well, hey, cut that. Maybe we preserved something that maybe they didn't. I don't know. I'm not putting that out there. I'm just saying, perhaps we need to have some conversations with the community on our level to have real talk conversations and not leave that to the administration, because we represent the community is what I'm saying. But I also think we need to explore, when I hear you say forecasts and cuts need to be made, I immediately go to cuts need to be made to maintain some semblance of what we had. And I immediately think of the kids who aren't like what we had in our seats right now. Some of these kids are different. They are experiencing different things in their lives. They're dealing with name, image, and likeness as a state mandate. We didn't have to deal with that sort of stuff. They are content creators. They're making money at home. They're dealing with things that we didn't have to deal with. So this is a new type of student sitting in our seats. We may have to, and I've invited administration to reimagine education. Now it's in our face. We need to do some things different. And I think that the administration and the administrative team, of which I'm talking to the treasurer and everybody else, you all need to, in addition to coming to us about cuts, you all need to be creative and come to us about some different things as well. Some ways to potentially reimagine education so that we stay the #1 urban school district in the state of Ohio. And what does that look like? If we have to potentially do this to some of our buildings, what could we potentially do maybe to that building or to this part that is different and engaging? That's not our role. Our role is to approve and to try to figure out what you guys want to do, but the community doesn't want it to all be gloom, doom. I don't either. So don't bring me some cuts, just cuts. Bring me those things. But if you're talking $20, $60 million in cuts, you better be talking about, well, we could be doing this too. And I'm sorry, I think it's important to say board members only get $5,000 a year. We're doing a lot of ideation, but you all need to be doing some other, in the forecast, you also need to be doing some ideation on potential revenue generation too. And I just think that's fair to say. It doesn't have to always be gloom, doom. There are some things out there that I want you all to explore in addition to cuts. And maybe it's not cuts, but it's reorganization. Maybe it's not cuts, but it's reimagining things. I'm trying to say it nicely. But that's what the community wants because our kids are different. And if we have a different type of kid, how do we educate a different type of kid? And that's what we need because this is changing. And I'm tired of hearing, people know it's the state's fault. They understand that. They know that we have to do things differently, but they want something different. And so, it's just behooving us. I don't want to keep hearing a sad conversation. Don't let me leave that board meeting Monday all depressed and sad. To Eve's point, this is serious. And if this is people, but if you guys are really, 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 really understanding it, we're all motivated. We're all angry. And so I agree that to her point. Now she's mad because if you notice that she don't often get as angry. I'm looking over here like, is she about to? We need to look at the exits. We need to look for the
I
exits.
used to do that.
But the seriousness of it is that I've invited you, and I know other board members have invited you all to reimagine education multiple times. Bring me the forecast with some other possibilities too. So don't just talk to me about some $20 million in cuts. And we got a list. I got the point. But come with some other stuff too. That's my soliloquy.
Cool.
Thank you.
Jim? So Monday,
Okay, so let's,
talk a little bit more about the forecast.
all right, let's try to get through some pieces of this. All
Okay.
right, so we talked about property tax revenue, we know where that's at. If you keep going, Rob, we kind of talked about what property tax looks like.
Right.
One more. All right, this is our doom and gloom state restricted grants. So, yeah, this is what being on the guarantee looks like. So I think like we know without a levy, this is where revenue is going to be significantly. There are opportunities, I think, for additional revenue generation here and there. I don't know that there are opportunities that make huge swings in our budget. I mean, there are spots, there's definitely some things we're exploring. There's some conversations we're having with folks, about ways to bring in some revenue, but I don't know that there are a lot of things in our toolkit right now that swing the district by 20, 40, $50 million over the course of any year.
Well, and there are things that we don't necessarily like to do. I mean, the one-time sale of something generates revenue. Taxes, revenue, generates revenue. You talking about providing services to other school districts, because we have such a wonderful administrative group of people, and there are smaller school districts that would benefit from the expertise that we have here. That could be, I mean, if you could come up with it, to Kareem's point, maybe you expand the size of our grant department that write the grants. Maybe it's the partnership piece, so it's sale of prop. So I think that makes sense to give sort of. I honestly think, in part because of ad hoc, I think we've been reinventing the district very curiously and very well, and I think we've seen some major benefit for it with the corridors and what have you. I think I think we've been reinventing periodically, but I do think it's not a bad idea to talk about revenue generation and what that means. But you're right, it's not going to make the equivalent of a 7 mil property tax or have that stability or be able to count on it or budget to it. But what can we do to we are the leaders in partnerships, and people are paying millions of dollars in their own way for our kids. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's an interesting approach.
And I think there are a lot of these things are ands. Like, do we need significant additional revenue? Yes. And we need to look for every grant we can get.
That's right.
And we need to look at other ways to use our buildings to generate revenue. And we need to maybe look at ways to, our staff generate revenue. Same
And
thing.
divest ourselves of some of the stuff we have.
And we
if there's
can
any
divest
interest in the
assets,
marketplace.
assets we don't have, and same thing. Are we going to continue to evolve in our efficiency? Yes. I mean, part of the issue we're at right now is, and a lot of times, it takes money to make money, right? And if you don't have enough, if you don't have enough seed money, it's very hard to grow. I mean, talk about increasing our grant staff. We cut our grant staff this year.
Exactly.
We've cut a lot of things. So as much as I would love to have Kevin go out and do other folks' forecast,
Right now, he's the only one doing this.
right now Kevin's getting full play.
Oh, Lord.
If there are a lot of places. I mean, we had a conversation yesterday, President Craig and I did about right sizing buildings, and there are probably CPS buildings that will close over time. But the question is it oh my gosh, we're out of money, we have to make emergency closures? Or is it we've spent the money, we've done the demographic research, we've done the building research, we've done the neighborhood outreach, we've dealt with the community, and
Well,
in a 10-year
and Brandon's been very clear on a number of cases that it's not something you do at the end.
Right.
If we're gonna be closing any building somewhere along the line, you're gonna be talking about that 2 years in advance for folks and what have you, so yeah.
It's one thing to say we're out of money, we have to do this.
But we did actually close some buildings.
We did.
Because we made some elementaries into middle schools. So those are no longer elementary school. I mean, it's weird, or even something as simple as Riverview, but
It's another thing to say we have a 20-year plan
That's
that
right.
includes, the new FMP and these facilities don't fit into that 20-year plan.
that's right.
So
Or where
much-
people live.
Those are much different conversations, and you can have much stronger conversations the second one. So if we kind of clear through revenue.
Go ahead.
All right, sorry, we're gonna try to get
Keep
back.
going.
All right, next slide, Rob. All right, so Kevin, this is the no new levy summary.
Right.
Here's where I think one of the real questions, if we want to change the forecast for Monday, comes in. So when we did expenditures, we forecasted expenditures to be above revenue, above no levy revenue. And we kept the number positive for next year and the 1 year out. That keeps us from having to go into fiscal caution with the state. Now, I'll tell you the good side downsides. We could revise expenditures to match revenues, which is what we've worked on for years. And we're happy to do that if that's the will of the committee. Where things get really interesting is this entire forecast document. If you look at the bottom numbers, if you forecast revenues to hit expenditures, which we've done for years, it looks like with a new levy, we have a ton of money in the bank. We are just putting millions and millions of dollars in the bank. And we all know that's not realistic. We all know that's not going to be a true statement. Ideally, we would put some millions of dollars in the bank, especially in the short term. But trying to thread the needle between the requirements of the forecast and how has been difficult.
I have, just like anybody else, I have an interest in avoiding the state getting interested in us. I spend a lot of my day making sure that the state doesn't get interested in us. But I also have an interest, a greater interest, honestly communicating to the public that we're asking, of which we're asking a levy. That this document or a document reflect the need for that levy more than it avoids getting the state riled up. Because I don't care if they get riled up for several months or a few months or whatever. Because if we pass the levy, they'll be unriled up. But you cannot tell people that we need money or that you tell in a board meeting that, you know, fiscal emergency is around the corner, and then have a document that doesn't, and this is the dilemma that you
This
guys
is
are
the
talking
dilemma,
about.
yeah.
This is the dilemma. I'm not saying anything different
Yeah,
than what you
yeah.
guys were saying. My preference would be put it factually, rather than necessarily try to avoid the state being crazy with us, because I don't care if they're crazy with us, they always give you a few months to figure out what you're gonna do. I know I've sat in on a couple of those conversations when they call you and you have to invent things that you're gonna be doing. That goes all the way back to Ronan, I think.
Yeah, I mean, understand if we show a deficit in first year out, state will require us to come up with a plan of corrections.
Yeah, well,
We will have to go through every line item and
Yeah,
come up
and they've
with
done that.
a list of cuts.
yeah. It's nasty. It's nasty, and you can't lie about it. I mean, and you have the treasurer and the superintendent, usually the president, the vice president of the board, and sometimes the finance chair or whatever. I mean, you have to agree, and the board has to kind of know what you're going through. But we're asking people for a levy because we need money. And we have, that forecast needs to indeed not be a lie. It's not, and it's not a lie, but it's what to do.
This is a dilemma.
You're really kind of serving two masters. You're worrying about the master state getting in our face, and you're also the master of the public that needs to see how bad this is.
Yes, and again, we're basically assuming that the board will not live up to its resolution to hold expenditures to revenues.
Exactly.
You
And-
know, because
but
that's
that is a part of it,
that's
too.
a third, that's literally a third master that,
It is,
Because you have to assume that the full board would agree.
Exactly.
That we would not go against what our resolution says.
yeah, so that's this is what, the problem is, we need 3 forecasts, we get to file 1. That is,
well,
that,
I'm going with
that
the
is the
honest
crux.
one that meets the needs of the public. Go ahead, sir.
That is the crux, we get to file 1.
Is this format that you're showing us here on this page, is this prescribed by the state?
100%,
I see, so.
Every line.
So that makes it difficult.
which is why,
Because
which
this
is why we
format, this
always,
format, it isn't really what we need,
which is why we always do a presentation
you know.
outside of it.
But
because-
I think
yes.
I think it might, you know, you're showing us with the levy building up a lot of money. I think what you're showing here to get to this 200 and 234, I don't think that's realistic either. I don't think that's helpful either.
It's 100.
Because if there was some way to show the idea that we're gonna have to cut 20 or 40 next year and going
60.
forward, that'll eat up that 298 million a lot faster than what you're showing here. So I don't know how you can, it's a prescribed format, that's difficult, because that would be a way to format it in a way that would be more realistic. I just don't know.
We've struggled with this
Yeah.
for a couple of weeks now, is how you either you go off the cliff and show what life looks like if the levy passes,
if
but you
this-
take it off the cliff.
If this format is for the state, I would be in favor of not inviting them down and having it show like this. I think what we show to the state and what we show to the public, you might have to have some version to the public that has some, serves the other masters as opposed to the state.
It just doesn't.
No, I'm not saying that like a liar. I'm just saying somehow anticipate in a format the cuts that we might have to make if there is no levy. I don't think we're doing a good job of that in either format right now, either the summary or this. the way
Well,
you
but
described.
the forecast does not include what the cuts would be. Forecast is you
Yeah.
have the money or you don't have the money.
Right.
My only thought is whatever message is communicated, or it has to be consistent.
Yes.
Yeah, so, because that will be the biggest way or the quickest way that you lose public trust.
Absolutely.
So whatever is being communicated out to the state, it has to be aligned to what's communicated to the public,
Yes.
so.
Now, how you manage to navigate that, I'm gonna let you be the expert, but.
I mean, Eve, are you suggesting we invite fiscal emergency right away on this thing?
Well, they don't show up. I mean, for a while. They won't show up before November 3rd.
How many days do we have? We got, what, 90 days?
You're going rogue.
We got 90 days to do the plan.
I'm always rogue.
rogue.
I'm always rogue. But my point is, to your point, you can't have two different documents because there is opposition to this levy.
You're absolutely right.
And all you need to do is have two different pieces of paper and we're done. We're telling the state one thing and we're telling the folks another thing. Or we're gonna tell both groups the same thing and see what happens. And what you guys have been living through, the dilemma is which thing to show. You're not talking about having two different documents. You're talking about deciding which document to do, right? Is that fair?
I mean, in reality, we have two different scenarios, right?
Right?
We have the levy passes and the levy fails scenario,
And I think that's fun to talk about.
but you get the
But
file,
the
but you get
document
to
is,
file
the
one.
document
right.
is the one you file, which is if and you cannot, I've always understood you can't anticipate the levy money.
Yeah,
I've always
you
been,
gotta
I've
be
heard that
prudent.
for 18 years.
Yeah, you gotta be prudent.
When you did it before, when you did this before, did you anticipate the levy or did you not? I'm sorry, Rob, when you've been in this position before, did you put the levy down there or did you not?
When we were faced with this state coming in, no, we didn't anticipate it, because and I've always thought you can't anticipate levy money in a forecast.
That's correct.
So then we
Anyway.
shouldn't put it in there.
Well, you mean the bottom in yellow, this part, that's here?
Yes, I mean, I don't understand why we can't
Is that
just
prescribed?
put
Is
it,
that
not put it in there, and then the narrative, you can make the glass half full or the glass half empty when you talk about it.
Well,
That's
if you
just the
said-
narrative.
Mike, in the
the
board
hell
meeting, you
is the
said
difference?
that we
I'm
could be in
sorry.
fiscal emergency within 1 year.
That's what he
This chart
said,
needs to show what you said.
yes.
I mean, we are within $13,902 for fiscal
Boom.
emergency.
But that's the reality, but that's the truth.
That is a rounding error for anyone.
It's not even.
That is
here, I don't look good
that
in
is one
orange.
bad invoice, right? That is one
look
that is
good
one
behind
bad
bars.
invoice, right?
If the dilemma you guys have been going through is what do we do? I would be more than willing to risk the state being upset with us than us communicating one thing last Monday and a different thing this coming Monday.
So does that 13,908 need to be a red number instead of a black number?
I don't know.
I mean, the second we do that, the state is going to require us to go line by line.
Oh.
Okay.
It will be the next 3 months of work, which I will probably do a lot of it
We have to
anyway.
do anyway if we're gonna make the cuts anyway.
So then,
Well, and if the levy doesn't pass,
We're gonna do it anyway.
right, we're going to do a lot of it anyway, for sure. I mean,
Well, that's it. If the levy
It doesn't-
fails, you're
yeah,
gonna
if
be
the levy
doing it.
fails, you're gonna be doing it anyway.
so I guess, so take on that. So is it the assumption of this group, let's ask this, is it the assumption of this committee that the resolution, that the board will not be able to continue with the resolution to cut expenses to match revenues? I mean, that's kind of,
I can't predict that.
that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of where our red line comes in, right? Our red line comes in because we're assuming that we will not be able to keep this going
For fiscal 08.
into the
Or
future without new funds.
Well, that's the message we're communicating to the community. If you want to have CPS, either as it is or as you wish it to be, depending upon where your brain is, we can't have less money than we already have.
Agree.
And we actually need more money, or we wouldn't be asking for a levy. And we spent 10 years not asking because we were always willing to make whatever we needed to cut to do. I don't know, after what we've lived through the last 3 years, I don't know that there's an interest in making any more cuts.
Well, so it's the fiscal 2029. If that 13,902 becomes a red number, that changes the amount of work that we have to do internally. Is that correct?
Yes,
Do we have the resources to do that work?
we'll have to figure it out. I mean, that's the thing, we'll have to figure it out. There's not an option not to, but you're obligating the administration to do a lot of, you're basically accelerating the budget discussion
Well,
into the fall.
We're going to do that anyway.
that's. what
Craig
we
wanted to do
right?
that anyway, so.
Yeah. I just am trying to remember exactly what was said last Monday. And I'm thinking in terms of, it's been 10 years since we asked for money, so it must be desperate enough that we need it.
You're right.
And that we've made some determination that we cannot do, as I say, CPS as is or as we wish it to be with the amount of money that we have. I mean, we can re-envision, we can innovate, we can reorganize, we can do all kinds of stuff, which I think in many ways we have, but not to the level that would be required. But I don't want, and you don't want two different documents, but I'm much less afraid of the state than I am
The voters.
the voters.
Yeah.
Because I'm always afraid of the voters. That's why
So,
I keep
for
getting
example,
elected.
if you look at this chart, line 6010, that for fiscal 2028, it says minus 11 million.
Yep.
We're already talking about 20 to 40 million.
We're-
For that line.
Yeah,
right?
so we're anticipating that revenue goes up slightly there. And that the best we can do is spend after whatever cuts are done, the best we can get is 11 million, is that we're gonna spend $11 million more than we take in. So the closest we can get the budget gap is 11 million.
Okay, as in terms of those options that you
Yeah,
showed.
whatever
right.
we have to put up, whatever we have to
So-
do,
so
the
that-
best
so
we
that-
can do is $11 million.
All right, so there's some justification for that.
And then the next year it's 17, and then the next year it's 30, almost 29.
So these are like the minimum cuts, not the,
That's like we do all the same processes we've done, and we
Right.
get to the end, we say the best we can do is $11 million gap. Instead of, most years we say, hey, we're zero, or we're, $1 million or less, the best we can do is 11 million.
that's not the 20 to 40 we're talking about.
No, that assumes that we found, somehow, by some means, we found, 10 to $30 million of cuts somehow, whatever those things are from the list or things we haven't discussed.
Well, after the 3 years we've lived through, if you tell people, well, the only thing we have to cut is 11 million, they'll say, well, you don't need that levy.
Yeah,
Because you've been able to cut 50 here and 40 there and 32 here.
I think the other challenge here too is, so as our expenditure growth is between 1.2 and 2.8, that's probably not realistic.
yeah.
So I mean, we're holding it back, not as much as saying we're gonna keep expenditures at the revenue level, but we're still holding that back. Another thing because I didn't like, because we're showing a really tight expenditure line, but then with the new levy, it's showing this large balance. But the reality is, over those 5 years, an example is like the deferred maintenance.
Sure.
We're not assuming really anything being
Anything,
spent on
I
that for
know.
5 years.
Right.
So if the levy passes, it's gonna be realistic that the board is gonna say, we need to do some of those emergency
We'll
repairs.
absorb all that money.
Justifications.
And so, but we can't put the building plan in to the expenditures without assuming a levy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
So just another thought process that kind of makes it complicated.
It was
Even more
stated
complicated.
that we would be in fiscal emergency within 2 years, right?
Yeah. And that, well, this is,
That's the public record.
right. This only gets us, well, is this within 2 years or 3 year?
I thought it was the third year. I thought, was it the third year?
So we're in
29.
27 now.
We're in
so-
27 now. We
Yeah.
said 28, we could, yeah,
Yeah, it's, that was
29.
the
we could-
record. And
I'd
that-
say
that may have been
29.
one vote there.
So on Monday, when we have a discussion, will we get a presentation like this one
I hope
that
not.
we have to vote on, and that's, or do we have a chance to alter it and vote again, or what?
Jesus.
We get one,
We can't, you know what, we can't have an argument at the board.
we get one meeting to do this.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
right,
one meeting to pass it,
right.
and we can't have, and this is why these guys brought this to this committee. I'm sorry
Right.
it took us
To
this
hash
late
it
into
out a
the
little bit, yeah.
thing, because they've been dealing with this dilemma. And my answer to the dilemma is this, I welcome the state compared to having the voters think that we are crying wolf. Because the minute you do that, you can never go back to them. And we haven't done that. We've been very, very good. You cannot lie to the people. You cannot fib. You can't massage something.
So what are you specifically
I think the
recommending?
nasty, I bring the forecast that's nasty. The forecast that verifies what was said the other Monday.
So it's nastier than this one?
I think so.
But I think you should send it to board members ahead of time and let
Yeah,
them
so they
ask you
can
questions.
look.
Part of the problem is that information is not sent out ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like it used to be, and allow board members to ask you questions. When you get questions on the floor, when you send out information on the floor, that's where you're gonna get the questions.
Yeah.
So get all that gray area out so that board members can ask you questions before the meeting, so they have clarity. And then their questions are informed to you directly, you know, like, hey, Mike, what does this mean? Not on the floor. So to me, send it out ahead of time. Ask them for clarity if they need it.
So this is the August forecast. What does the November forecast do?
There isn't one. Next forecast is February.
Oh, February. So if we have a forecast for Eve's recommendation to have it be uglier than this one, and the levy does not pass, whatever we do in February, can it be less ugly? Or are we stuck with what it,
You can amend your forecast.
you can amend your
anytime.
forecast?
I mean, if we go ugly forecast, though, we will have a written plan. We will file with the state of how we're gonna make reductions.
Okay.
I believe we have to live with that. I believe the board has to approve it. If I remember correctly, the board
has to approve what the administration comes up
Board
with.
has to approve the
That's why
plan.
the board gets involved throughout
yes.
as to what would happen.
And what could happen in February to mitigate some of that suffering if the levy does not pass?
I mean, I think it's,
If the levy doesn't pass, we're gonna be making some cuts.
if it doesn't pass, you have a blueprint. I mean, you have a blueprint of cuts. I mean, there's,
Let me re-ask my question. If we have an adjusted forecast in February that's less ugly because we're anticipating being financially trying to live within the revenue that we have, does that change what the state will do to us in terms of their microscope?
ideally, it would, once you file your plan, they're gonna expect your next forecast to match the plan.
Yeah,
And they're probably gonna kind of walk away and say, okay, you made your
Time out. Make sure I got the language right. So we're going to do a forecast that's ugly with a plan. And if we put that plan into place, then our next forecast in February, the state might walk away and not bother us, assuming a levy doesn't pass. Is that a scenario that could be helpful?
I would say either way, yeah. The second we turn in a forecast that shows a deficit in either 28 or 29, state is gonna ask us to create a plan of corrections.
Sure.
Not gonna ask us, they will require us to do so.
and they should.
Yeah.
It will be a fairly big news story, and we will have to go through and we will have to do a very voluminous plan of correction the board will have to approve. Based on that, basically is the blueprint for making cuts, and then your February forecast would match that blueprint because you would take your expenditures in those years down to the numbers,
I
and
got
then
it.
they would go, okay, you're good, everything's good.
So it's going to be a fairly big news story. That's a news story that happens between now and November. Is that correct?
Yeah, it will be a news story. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. But the treasurer already said it.
Right. That we'd be in fiscal emergency within a year.
If we can't
Are you
make
thinking that that's a
the
good thing?
cuts.
Are you thinking that that's good, Jim?
I'm
trying
trying
to
to understand what our path out is if the levy doesn't pass. And what I'm hearing is there is a path out that could reduce the microscope of the state,
I
correct?
mean, yeah, it all comes back to
So,
the
yes,
cuts
there's
that,
a- there's a- there's
the
an
cuts that nobody
opportunity.
wants to make.
So if we have something ugly here, we just have to correct that it gets less ugly no matter what, and we'll try to go
And
forward.
if the levy fails, we make the cuts,
Yep,
and we know we'll be on the ballot in May.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we know this, and we know that whatever the state would, they let you tell them, this is the old, now maybe they don't do it this way, but they tell you, you have to figure out how to not have that.
Yep.
And then you send that to them, and there's like these telephone conversations and what is probably Zoom now or whatever. And they agree or disagree or say yes, we say no. Sometimes some of the stuff is very generic. Well, we will not do this. And it was kind of a wink and a blink that, we still will or something. I mean, that's how it works a little bit. But I mean, the cuts are, if the levy doesn't pass, we're gonna be cutting anyway. So it's either gonna be a plan that we share with the state, or it's gonna be the cuts that we're gonna make because the levy fails.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's basically the blueprint. You're creating the blueprint of what you're gonna have to do.
Right.
It's
And
just,
frankly, that might help our whole budget process anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, even the word blueprint makes me be happier than this sort of line by line stuff we've been living
I mean,
with.
it gives you the playbook. You
Yeah, it
know,
does.
Forces people to confront the realities that, I mean, the bad thing is it'll create some panic, you know, because it'll be the state coming in, it'll create a lot of, I think disruption and concern from parents and families because, they're not as deeply involved in the process as we are, So while we can say, hey, we can work with the state and we'll figure this out, some people are gonna panic and say, oh my God, there's fiscal caution or the sky is falling.
Well, but again, if the levy doesn't pass, we'd have to be making significant cuts to not be in fiscal emergency.
At the end of the day, that's the thing.
No matter what,
Yeah.
we'd be cutting.
Like, the cuts don't go away because we don't want to face them.
That's right.
They're there, we just, it's like the amount of revenue isn't going to change, other than having a levy, and so the only thing you can cut are expenditures. We've based the forecast on years of saying, expenditures are gonna hit revenues, or expenditures are gonna match revenues.
Well, and you all have.
And if we can't do that anymore, then that's the thing. If we don't feel we can do that anymore, that's what this forecast reflects.
And if we felt we could do that, we shouldn't have asked for a levy.
That is correct.
Because when we ask for a levy, we're saying we can't cut enough to not ask for a levy or live within our means anymore. I mean, it's 10 years, for God's sake. Every sentence needs to start with,
10
it's
years.
been 10 years.
10 years, yeah. So we will update the forecast. Just trying to think of what number we want to put in for expenditure growth. Probably
Well, you guys are.
4% or so. I mean, we were at like 1.5 and 1.2.
So using my example
So sorry to ruin your weekend.
of like capital outlay, I mean, we're showing, 500,000 for every year. We could include some additional monies there, assuming like emergency repair, like I could
Sure.
easily include a
Just
couple
for the
$1 million there.
Just today.
That is,
Just today.
so like you talked about like multiple forecast, we have these decisions.
That's right,
Are
exactly.
we reflecting
It's
as
not
if we're not
two
gonna
two
spend
different pieces
anything?
of paper, you're right, it's
Or
like,
we're gonna spend $5 million?
yeah.
It's somewhere in between, right? If we feel like, if it's an emergency and we don't have a choice, then we might spend $5 million. If it's totally up to other things, we might spend one. So it's all about decisions and what we choose to report. So, because I don't want to give like, we came up with this forecast using a set of assumptions.
Right,
I can come up with a very
Other
different
assumptions.
forecast
Absolutely.
using other assumptions. So it is a fluid thing. I just kind of want to talk about, but yeah, I think that's what we'll have to look at. If it's somewhere in the 4 or 5%, what kind of outcome that would give us, and we can look at that. We could give you two scenarios. We could give you a 6% and a 3%.
I thought we only got
I'll
to
try to
the
just do
one.
Well, I mean, for your consideration to then approve to send to the state. So I'm saying we as a team can give you options to consider.
Some scenarios.
Yes. But ultimately, yes, we can only
only
file
one thing can
one.
pass.
Is it good to talk about scenarios in the board meeting? I don't think so. I think we should
I
have your
think that's what we
forecast.
did today.
Yeah, I kind of think that's
Yeah.
where today.
I mean, I like the idea of scenarios. I love that, but I think we've got a time crunch and we've got a board meeting. So I think one would
And,
be,
and the board cannot look indecisive on Monday,
right.
Yeah.
and neither can the administration. It's 85 days. We already look weird, because we voted for two
You're
different
using
things.
1.5% inflation?
Some spots.
Of course, we always look weird.
Depend, like certain categories, maybe there was less than that. Other categories was higher. So it wasn't like a cookie.
I understand, but some of those numbers ought to be 3.5, 4, based on what you know today.
I mean, yeah.
And honestly, like my first pass probably did use a higher percentage, and then as I had to fit it all into the,
Well, it's the, what are we trying to accomplish? And so that was the dilemma you guys were trying to accomplish, first of all.
If we
And I
do-
feel like there's even that tension at the board, the tension on making cuts is very difficult, some board members are like, burn it down, and other board members are
Right.
like, you can't touch any of these things, and at the end of the day, the 7 of you end up in some middle spot, but
right.
there's a tension.
So if we have this ugly forecast,
Yep.
which would be closer to reality, and the levy passes, then
Cool.
what happens with the state? Do they just say, see you guys, you good?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think they'd ask you to file an amended.
Yeah,
We would file an
sure, you have to
amended
And then they would
file a
evaluate that.
plan, but it'd be easy, it'd be an easy plan.
Yeah.
It's always easier to make plans when there's revenue.
Sure. So I think.
Even
I thi- I
vacations
think-
work
I think
better that
Eve-
way.
I think Eve's making a good point.
Yeah, okay.
She's making a good point. I mean, you said it, and we'd be in fiscal emergency in a year with the $20 to $40 million of cuts that we may or may not make. We're in fiscal emergency in a year. We are. We only got 40 million in reserve, right here.
Okay.
And that's part of the challenge, because even the last 2 years where the board has had a commitment, there have been other strategic things that have happened, and our cash balance has actually gone down the
Right.
last 2 years.
Right.
That trend is probably going to continue. So unfortunately, that just adds another layer of challenge, I think.
I don't know how it'll go, part of the discussion in the meeting with the board on Monday, but there's a component of this that shows us getting in a fiscal emergency, but even if the levy passes, we are gonna have to be looking at probably I won't say making cuts, distributing our resources differently to pay for strategic plan initiatives. It's not all just to keep the doors open.
Well, and to the point too, nobody's gonna pass the levy thinking that you keep doing the same thing. I
Right.
mean, the board's been portions of the board have been very adamant about that. That's part of the attraction of the strategic plan.
Yeah,
So I think this makes the better case for the levy,
yeah.
and it's more realistic, and you amend whatever is done. We hate to, I mean, so that would be, I think is that sort of where we are, to put the reality, the negative reality, the hard reality?
So we're basically taking the governor off of the board being able to cut enough to, that's the reality of it is.
Well, I found that kind of weird anyway.
But I know you don't like that phraseology, but
I really didn't. It's like, if the board can make the cuts, we won't be in a fiscal emergency. Well, you just gave everybody an out. Board, go make cuts, so we don't have to have a levy.
Right.
If that was the case, we should have made 3 times the amount of cuts over the last 2 years that we made in order to avoid a levy. In reality, our cuts should have been more severe the last 2 years, at least, maybe 3, to have avoided a levy. But again, it's not even CPS, you reach a point. You didn't have a board that was ready to consolidate 6 schools into 3. I mean, or stop transportation.
I mean, that's the thing. It's, I mean, we say as the board will make cuts, but is the community willing to accept?
Well, exactly.
Because, at the end of the day,
They show up.
At the end of the day, the administration is, works for the board, and the board works for the community and the voters. And so is the community willing to accept the CPS that looks radically different? Are you willing to accept the CPS that doesn't transport kids in high school?
Right.
You willing to accept the CPS without magnet schools? CPS without, basically roughly
Extracurricular.
three extracurriculars?
You gotta make the forecast ugly.
Do you wanna, do we value our sports teams? Do we value our bands? Do we value, Montessori education? Do we value CCP classes? Do we value?
I've just spent these many, many years here, because it's been so many years in Wyoming. I want our kids to have at least a fighting chance to compete with those Wyoming kids that get everything. And they start with almost everything. And they've got great schools, and they've got great support, and they're great kids. And it's unusually diverse for a suburban community, but, I've worked with top suburban district, and I've worked with the top urban district. I feel very honored, but our kids won't even have a fighting chance if we don't have all the things that we're offering them now.
If you don't care about outcomes, balancing the budget's very easy.
That's right.
Yeah. But
That's exactly right.
there is a reason we are the top achieving urban school district in Ohio. It's not by accident. It's by a series of decisions that have been made, and we're at the point where the next level of cuts that starts to undo those decisions.
And we have still so much more to do
Yeah.
to have more success, to have even greater results. So forget the greater results. So yeah, I think it should be a realistic, hard-hitting forecast that matches what was said publicly.
Probably off topic just a little bit.
Okay.
As we've been listening, one of the charts that Cody had showed I think it's in
Code man.
2022, a significant drop in the businesses contributing. I think that's worth noting. I don't think it's personal property tax either.
Personal property tax is much older.
Older than that. But I think, do you know what the cause of that is or why that happened? maybe that's a Jessica Miranda question.
Check it out.
Which one are you looking at?
But I think that's something worth
I think
mentioning
it's,
on
I think
Monday.
it's very telling.
Which one are you looking at there?
This one, there's a big drop in businesses goes from 56 to 49.
That's the millage rates. So businesses pay a higher millage rate because they don't get all the owner occupied credits and all those things.
So does it mean they're contributing less money?
Different graph. Different graph, it's out there.
That would be a better graph than this one. That would be a much better graph
I'm glad
than
you
this
saw
one.
that.
Because I think businesses pay less, and there was a bigger burden on residential taxpayers over time.
Over time, it's 100% because of the personal property thing.
Oh,
And also,
maybe, but
I
if
think
you could,
commercial-
I think that might be an interesting chart, better chart. People don't understand millage anyway.
No, I don't understand it.
So,
I think,
yeah. But I do, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think a longer, like over the last
It
decade,
might be a 10-year window, right?
there was definitely a push from the legislature to
Person.
reduce commercial tax, which, if nothing else, caused the residential pie to be higher.
To go up.
Because like throughout America,
Right.
business has been getting
But if we've got a lot of
an
voters,
unfair deal.
but we have voters who are, as Dr. Moffett says, we got voters that are struggling to stay in their
Me.
house. And some of that is because the businesses are paying less. It's not just because.
Well, and that was the only super negative about the income tax as far as I was concerned. Is that business is not paying.
Well, and,
at all.
I mean,
And that was
that
part
was-
of
that
their
was a-
attraction for the income tax, at least businesses was.
I don't know, it'll be interesting if we look at that income tax for the renewal in 2029, because there's an unintended consequence of what happens to their employees. That I think a business would look at.
I would hope they would care, but I'm not.
But I mean, they might have an issue with employee retention and employee attraction, there's other consequences to it.
I try, but when you bait me, then, well, I'm not gonna get into that, but I do think that to your point around community involvement, part of the community's problem is that we talk about things in committee and we talk about things at the board level. And then when we do make drastic changes, we haven't engaged the community enough. And so if we're gonna be talking about closing buildings and we're gonna be talking about making programmatic changes, you don't just do that for 1 or 2 meetings and then all of a sudden you're talking about a whole district change, and then of course the community is going to come out. To the same point, to my point, when you have a strategic plan that has 300 engagement people on there and you only had a survey of 139 people, that's my point. That's not engagement. And so if we are going to be talking about making significant impact to this district around state involvement or whatever, it needs to have authentic engagement, and it needs to be a significant press release saying, this is where we are and this is where we find ourselves. And I bet the community would be interested. They may not understand it all to the point of having slides that are relevant. Maybe they don't need the whole 6-deck piece, but they need one slide that says this with the person actually talking, and we can work on that. But we need to have real live engagement sessions where the community is brought to the table in a way that they can understand it, in a place that is relevant to them, with information that's relevant to them, multiple times, over time, that tells them where we are. And we don't do that. So, we're gonna keep getting the community coming out when we're on fire, talking about closing buildings, because that's when they engage, is when the news media comes and says a big story that says, hey, we're gonna close 6 buildings. Well, we've been talking about it for 2 years, and they don't realize that. So some of that is on us as well. But this is the time that we need to start talking about that now, my personal opinion.
People show up when you raise their taxes or you close your schools. It's the two quickest ways to get people fired up. Okay, I think we know what we're doing
I think
here.
we're adjourned.
Are we adjourned?